welcome to Cat Gurl Film Podcast.
Yay!
I'm here with my host, Mr. Cat.
Oh, yay! I'm the host this time. Yes, and I'm here
You said you were the host last time.
Yeah.
I'm the special guest.
Then where's the frog? I thought he was always going to be this, but never mind. Actually, no. And I'm here
Do
with.
you forget already?
I forget everything already. But anyway, yeah, I am here with my co-host.
Ooh, I got promoted.
You're fired.
All right, back to special guest, I guess.
Yep. I'm here with Mr. Gurl.
Yeah, hello.
And yeah, we are on week 2 of the Cat Gurl Film Podcast, where this week we shall be talking about our favorite movies spoiled.
Yes. So last week we talked about our top 20 list in a non-spoiler fashion. This time we're going to go a little bit more in depth. None of these movies have any sort of twist or anything about them, I don't believe. Mm-hmm. So, in the event you're like hesitant about this episode being like, oh, I don't want these things to be spoiled, the spoilers aren't going to be that big. We're mainly going to be going over particular scenes. So if you still haven't seen these movies, the worst you're going to get is that when you get to a scene being like, ooh, I know that they talked about the scene and this is supposed to be very interesting.
Yes.
So
pretty much, without any further ado, let's go ahead and get started. So let's start with the first one. Indiana Jones, Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Indeed.
Alright, so is there anything that is like particularly spoilery that I guess we can talk about?
So, this is a tale about the Ark of the Covenant, the Jewish and also, I guess, Christian artifact. It's more related to Judaism.
Pretty much Abrahamic religions, they all talk about the Ark of the Covenant in some fashion.
Yeah, so, this is going over that, in which case, the whole movie is basically this kind of, backwards, forwards, chase of that item. The biggest, like, spoiler that we'd be talking about this movie is the ending. In which case is the, effect that created, basically the PG-13 rating.
Mm-hmm.
In which case, if you didn't know, PG-13 really wasn't a thing before this movie. This movie wound up creating PG-13 because by the end of this movie, they wound up having people explode.
Yeah. Pretty much what happened in the scene is that you have the main antagonists in the movie, which were a bunch of Nazis, and pretty much they were opening up this Ark of the Covenant, and there's little hints dropped throughout the movie that just like seemed to hint at there's some supernatural elements with the Ark. They just never really explained it until we finally got to the scene where, yeah, they opened up the Ark of the Covenant, and everybody's faces started to melt away. Pretty graphically, I should say. So, yeah. That's pretty much, like, one of the more standout pieces of the movie. Heck, I believe one of their faces, like, one of the main antagonists' faces melting away is, like, a popular meme at this point. So, yeah, that's pretty much the only one. The only other spoiler thing I can think of
By the way, the effect is very gruesome for the time.
Oh, yeah. Actually, now that I think about it, which one came first? Raiders of the Lost Ark or The Thing? I wonder if there's any inspiration between the two.
I believe Raiders is a few years before, because I believe The Thing is mid-80s. And I believe Raiders is early 80s, if not late 70s.
I'm not too sure. I believe it might have been really early 80s, because that was when Spielberg finished Jaws before he did Indiana Jones, and Jaws came out in like 77, somewhere around there.
Yeah. So I believe it was before The Thing, because I'm pretty sure The Thing was mid-80s.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay. So, yeah, that's pretty much all I can think about. I guess the next one is Wallace and Gromit, Curse of the Were-Rabbit from 2005.
In which case this movie doesn't really have anything spoilery.
Yeah, not really.
It's just a fun movie, in which case the most spoiler thing I can probably say is a surprising amount of sexual jokes.
Oh, yeah.
So
yeah, quite a lot. Especially some since it's like a movie that deals with a lot of interesting puns related to certain fruits and vegetables.
Yeah.
Check out my melons, for example. It's one that I instantly remember. But really, honestly, this movie is really something that you really shouldn't really spoil some of the jokes, because some of them are pretty clever.
Yeah.
So we just still say, like, just go check it out. It's very short, so I don't really have much to say on that.
Same.
Alright, next up is Throne of Blood. So last week
we kind of spoiled it a little bit last time.
Yeah, a little bit we spoiled it, but I guess we could try to give us some context into this. So one of my favorite things, personally, is Shakespeare. Yes, I am very hipstery. You could take it as you will. But I love Macbeth. It's one of my favorite pieces of playwright or literature or any type of like dynamic. Whenever you see stuff in cinema or anything really, it's like a very popular thing of like, oh, being power hungry and just killing off your best friends to get higher in the ranks. This one, Throne of Blood, is pretty much a Japanese take on Macbeth. And Bryce summed it up whenever we finished up watching the movie when somebody recommended Throne of Blood to him. Bryce, please take this away. You could do it better than I could.
Throne of Blood is a post-imperial Japanese take on the samurai period of Japan, adapting I believe it was Elizabethan period, because I believe Shakespeare was Elizabethan, writer of a pre-imperial England's period. It's such a funny series of chains being like, it's a take on this, on a take on this, on a take on this, on a take on this.
You love to see that.
And we're watching from modern day, too, just to add another layer.
Yeah, literally this movie is like layers upon layers on that. However, I guess we could just spoil a few little key things that did happen within the movie.
Yes.
So, like, for instance, the witches, for example, in Macbeth, there's usually 3. However, there's one, which I believe the Japanese term for a ghost would be a yokai.
Yes.
And essentially, it's just like one old man that is giving off predictions to our titular character that is inspired by Macbeth and Banquo. Just explaining all these different things that are going to happen, and it's just like, yeah, beat for beat. I instantly recognized it was Macbeth pretty early on, and I just thought, I'm really curious on how they're going to do more of this. I was wondering how they would do the whole aspect of, in Macbeth, if you know, Macbeth was pretty much projected to die from a man that was born not of a woman. And in the play, it was he was born via C-section. I can't fully remember what happened in the movie, but I do know like it was projecting that Macbeth would be killed by by the moving forests. I know that was one thing, and it was very interesting on how they did it. Was that they had like hundreds of different men just carrying large bushes through the fog.
By the way, the fog in this movie is really good.
Yeah, we have one thing we had to really go at. The fact that the director actually was shooting arrows at his actors. Yeah. That is hilarious. It's at the very end of the movie. It's completely... Honestly, I would be surprised if it was just genuine reactions, but... Yeah. Great movie. Definitely check it out. Alright, next one is Clockwork Orange. Okay, so where do you start with this one? Like we said last week, we said a lot of gruesome sexual violence.
Yes.
Literally in the first few minutes, you would be very well known and versed into that. However, I'm going to see if I can try not to talk about that too much. Let's talk about the midpoint of the movie where our titular character is going through, quote, therapy to get treatment. Yes. Lots of psychological abuse is very evident.
Yes.
And some of it is very, not exactly the hardest to watch. It just makes you feel a little bit uncomfortable.
In my opinion, the best part about this movie is going to wind up being the whole scene going from the prison till he was being released out of prison. Because from there, the beginning of the movie is just him setting up being a delinquent.
Yes.
In which case, bunch of sexual violence, in my opinion, a couple unnecessary sex scenes as well. This is him doing that for a large amount of time. This just kind of feels like a trend, actually, with a lot of like big-scale Kubrick movies. I just like the middle a lot more than the beginning and the end. The beginning and the end, I feel, is always the weakest part of Kubrick films. The middle is always the strongest part.
It would be interesting. Have you ever found somebody that you could work with that could do well in the beginning and the ending parts of movies? Also, that's a lot of directors, is that I just noticed that most directors that I've ever seen have like good beginnings and endings. It's just the middle part that just
Kubrick, I feel, always has the strongest middle. It's just the beginning and the end I very rarely care.
But then again, like the middle point is the longest part, and it's always a hard time.
Kubrick doesn't make it like that.
Hold on. I was gonna say I was meaning by other directors though. I wasn't talking about Kubrick particularly.
Hard cut to 2001: Space Odyssey, a 40-minute intro.
Yeah. It's been a number of years since I've seen 2001.
2001's intro. If you haven't seen 2001 in a while, the intro drags a lot longer than you probably remember.
Are you kidding me? Episode 1 of Star Wars felt like an entire first act, and then all of a sudden, boom, we're in the third. Actually, probably Suicide Squad. The original one from 2016 may be more accurate. It had a
Maybe, I haven't seen that one. So.
It had a very drawn-out first act.
That makes sense.
And then the third act was... What? I don't know. The editing in that movie was terrible. So. But anyway, yeah, that's pretty much all I can say about Clockwork Orange before... If there's anything else you wanted to say, Bryce.
Yeah, no, I feel a weak beginning, weak ending, but a really strong middle is the best way to sum it up, in my opinion.
Okay. All right, let's move on to the next one. The Invisible Man, our oldest film in the entire list.
Yes.
Wasn't really to spoil because we kind of talked about it a lot last week.
Yeah.
With the whole special effects aspect.
Yeah, special effects are definitely the strongest part of this movie. In my opinion, how the civilians are treated, in my opinion, are very strong. I can give a couple examples now. The actual, like, cops and civilian interaction I really like because... At one point, they put out a listing being like, okay, we need to catch Invisible Man. If anyone has ideas, we will pay you a certain amount of money to do this. And the exact thing that happens is exactly what I expect to happen. Where people are calling in and giving the dumbest effing ideas and they're shooting them down. And it's so funny. And so, like, yeah, that would happen. Because someone's just like, why not lay barbed wire across a field? It's just like, I guess, but...
No, give them some credit. They might have thought about this for 5 minutes. But either way, yeah, like, they're really... Like, other than that, there's really nothing else really to spoil. I mean, like, It's a very generic story. I mean, like, most people have heard the story of the Invisible Man, and they might think of some ways that it would go, but...
Important, by the way, 1933.
Yeah, 1933, yeah, it's...
Pretty early on, silent era just ended about, I believe, 6 years before this.
So it's a very early talkie that, surprisingly enough, is still still around because shoot, a lot of those early movies are not all the way around.
Yeah, so a lot of times, so just to give you a little bit of prehistory before we move on, when the talkie first came out, movie studios just immediately were like, make whatever, people just want to see talkies, and they just kind of like barfed out for like the first year. Just whatever movies they had, like, ideas for. Like, all these silent movies, because, like, the Hollywood train was already in effect. They were just pumping out movie after movie after movie in the same lot over and over again. So, whenever the talkie first came out, they were just like, add words to this. And a lot of the people who were good at expressing themselves, they weren't quite used to being theatrically expressive with their words.
Yeah, they were very monotone with their delivery. Heck, but then a few years later, though, we did see a giant wave of talkies that were actually remakes of old silent movies, in which a lot of them were pretty solid.
So yeah,
but then again,
very beginning talkies were a bit harder, but as time went along, they became a lot stronger because the people who actually cared spent time trying to figure out, okay, we now have talkies, what am I gonna write? So it, like, took a while, and I feel like Invisible Man was, like, really at the beginning of that.
Yeah. Alright. So yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say.
Yeah.
Let's see. Alright, let's move on. Dr. Strangelove. So our second Kubrick movie here.
Yes.
And pretty much Bryce's favorite Kubrick movie on this one.
Yes, and this is one of the only movies where it's the exception of the beginning and end are weak. In my opinion, this movie is strong throughout the whole thing.
Yep. Pretty funny movie, too. Let's see. We could try to think of some funny little quotes here that I guess we could spoil.
Yeah, so one of my favorite jokes in this is more of a background joke, so I don't mind spoiling it. In which case, there is a battlefield going on, and then there's a billboard with... I can't remember what the exact phrase is, but I really love this one, where it's just a billboard... And it's just like, we strive for peace, or whatever. There's a battle going on in front of this billboard, which I thought was a very funny visual gag.
Oh, man. What are some other funny ones? One of my favorite jokes actually is one of the last few quotes in the movie. So we have ourselves a former Nazi official. He is sitting on a wheelchair throughout the entire thing.
Oh, yes. Okay.
We believe that it's understood that he is paraplegic and couldn't walk anymore. And then all of a sudden, they're all trying to make up some ideas and whatnot. And then all of a sudden, He just says, "I has a plan," and then he just yells out, "Monsieur, I can walk." That's one of my favorite jokes in the entire thing, and I just love to just say that every now and then.
If we were talking about favorite jokes, I think mine's fairly obvious.
Yeah, yours
where,
is really
the
obvious.
Russian official and the U.S. head of the military or something. I can't remember. It's not the military, but like a certain branch or whatever.
I believe he's more just a commander or something.
Yeah. But like them two wind up getting into a scrap. They wind up throwing each other onto the bench, and someone walks over going, "Stop this! There's no fighting in the war room."
Yep. No fighting in here. This is the war room. How about this? Like, we can talk about one other little funny tidbit about this movie, and it's the supposed food fight scene at the very end of the movie. Don't you remember?
Possibly. There's a lot that happens at the end.
Well, let's see. Apparently, they shot another ending to the movie, and it was actually a giant food fight.
Oh yes, you talked to me about this.
Yeah, I've only heard about it a little bit, and they did film it, and I believe whenever they were doing test screenings for the movie before they released it, audiences really didn't care for that ending. They thought it was like too silly.
Yeah.
So they changed it up to like something entirely different, just like having the atomic bomb just being...
Which I think is a much better ending.
That is a very much better ending.
It's a very iconic one.
Yeah. And besides also like that iconic shot of one of the people inside of the plane. I believe he's just a pilot though, and he's wearing a cowboy hat.
Yeah,
and he's just... Yep, he's woohooing all the way down. And what a way to go. Out with a bang. Alright. So let's see. Alright, so next up on our list is Little Shop of Horrors.
Yes.
Yep, so...
in which case, director's cut.
Director's cut.
I might as well specify why. Is that there's the original one, which I don't like, and
It's
the
more-
director's cut.
Yeah, the original ending is more of a, quote, happier ending.
Yes, so the original ending, in which case it's Seymour going off with his girl in the process of about, I would describe as 20 seconds, wraps up the movie with him defeating the final boss, grabbing on Audrey, and they just appear in this suburban house and being like, "Our life is over," and the movie ends. It's just like so effing sudden. And I'm just like, and then there's the director's cut, which was clearly the intention of the movie.
The plant kills everybody.
Yeah, in which case the plant reproduces, spreads across the whole planet by being so marketable, and winds up growing to enormous proportions and destroys the whole Earth. And it's such a fun sequence of events.
Yeah, oh my god. I personally don't care for this movie, but like that ending did call me off guard. I was like, oh, we're ending it like this. Okay.
Yeah, it's a musical with a bad ending.
And it's pretty. It is pretty funny. I ain't
And
gonna
by the way,
lie.
the music for the ending is so great.
Shoot. Oh man.
Because it's so cheery as this plant is just destroying a city. One of my favorite parts about that, too, in the ending, is when there's a little factory. So, by the way, there's a ton of scales and puppet work in this movie, and they're all very good. But at one point, they just get, like, the military out, and they're just firing at this plant. The plant just walks over to a factory, walks into the tube, just puts his mouth around, it just blows, and the whole thing just blows up. It's very funny.
Yeah. Oh man. Shoot.
Now, also, music very good. I talked about how I was going to talk about some of my favorite pieces when we got to the spoilers.
Go ahead.
One of the songs that I reference by far the most in my daily life is I Want to Be a Dentist, which is so funny because there's a character in the movie, he's a dentist, and he sings about how his mom saw he was a sadistic little crap and told him, well, since you're going to be sadistic, you might as well become a dentist.
I thought the song was called "I'm Just a Dentist" or something.
It's something about a dentist. I don't remember the exact phrasing, but like the basics of the song is that this guy growing up to be a dentist. Another one is "Down on Skid Row," which is one of the opening songs.
Oh yeah.
Which one of my favorite lines about in that song is "Depression is status quo."
You know what? Honestly, I just think about that entire movie as like a giant critique of consumerism in a weird way.
Oh yeah, it's a very good critique on
Consumerism.
consumerism.
Oh man, is it another critique of capitalism? Karl Marx coming out from the grave? No, I'm kidding. No, we're not gonna make that joke. Anyway, I don't really have that much else really to say. It's been a long while since we watched the movie.
I recommend you watch it again.
I might rewatch.
Because I think you would really enjoy it on rewatch.
I might enjoy it on rewatch. I just gotta give it some. I don't know. I might I don't know. I did rewatch a few other random movies on our list not that long ago, actually. I'll mention it again soon. But anyway, yeah. Little Shop of Horrors. It's a musical, so y'all go check it out. I'm sure y'all would like it more than I probably would, but I'll try to rewatch it again. So, yeah. Let's move on. Alright, so our next one. Alright, so this is the big one. 12 Angry Men.
So we're going to try keeping this short, because I'm sure we're going to have a whole episode dedicated to this in the future.
Yeah, it's going to be very much dedicated. It could become the longest episode ever, unless it competed with this
in our
one.
series.
in this entire series, or whatever you want to call this. Literally, this movie has so much you can dig your teeth into that I don't know. Just honestly, like we're trying to sum up everything in 3 minutes. It's just not going to do it justice.
Yeah. So basis of this, there's a jury, 12 people in the jury. A kid might have committed a crime. The jury has to determine beyond a reasonable doubt if he actually did commit that crime. And most of the juries do believe that he committed this crime, except for one, and the one guy has to convince the rest of the jury that he didn't do the crime.
Yep. And he starts convincing them one by one, and it is like some very, very good deduction of evidence and just thought-provoking analysis from our main lead that is the only one that is saying that he is not guilty, or he believes he is not guilty.
Yes, in which case this movie has some of the best dialogue in a movie I've ever seen.
Mm-hmm.
And in addition to that, there is amazing, very minute symbolism. Yes. It is very hard to tell, in which case, if you're someone who loves that kind of stuff, this movie is one of those where even the smallest detail has very good symbolism around it.
Oh, yeah. Without a doubt. Literally, I have so much that I would love to talk about this movie, but good lord, it is like going to take forever. So literally, hopefully sometime very soon, I might actually just say, Bryce, let's just push one of our episodes back just so we can finally get to this movie.
I have a slot for it.
Oh, perfect. What is the slot?
I'm not going to say it.
Lovely. Anyway, let's move on.
I don't have it in front of me is the reason.
Well, I'm the only one with my things on here, so oh well. Alright, anyway, so let's go ahead and move on. We will talk about 12 Angry Men more in detail, hopefully in the near future. But, anyway, let's move on to the next one. Oh, great, now I'm going to be called an idiot again. Alright, The Fugitive. Go, Bryce.
So, The Fugitive, this is starring Henry Ford, in which case it is a very good movie. It is extremely quotable, in my opinion. And this is basically talking about a guy who was in the house when his wife got murdered by a one-armed man, but he winds up not able to really convince the other people, considering how his wife was extremely wealthy, and she's dead now, and he was the sole beneficiary. And he winds up, by luck, getting broken out of prison by almost near mistake, and takes that chance to try solving his own crime while being actively pursued. And the whole movie is set in the city of Chicago. It's definitely one of those movies from the 80s that almost entirely is set in Chicago. And it does very interesting work from that. If I remember correctly, though, it's like not quite where it got to like ridiculous portions with like Ferris Bueller or anything like that. Where it's just like literally just, we are Chicago, please enjoy it. It doesn't do that proportion of Chicago loving, so.
Yeah.
But it still does like some very interesting scenery stuff. One of my favorite parts is that they have a good chase during the Irish Chicago Parade. That I really like, in which case winds up being involved, like going all the way from a staircase to bulletproof glass to trying to lose each other in the actual Parade of the Irish. I think it is a very good chase scene. By far, the special effect I have to talk about the most here is hopping the train, in which case the bus that he winds up getting transported in crashes onto a train railroad, and a train is coming down, and he has to escape the train before eventually jumping off the bus as the train hits it, and it is, in my opinion, one of the best special effects in cinema history.
I have nothing really to say. I have nothing really to say, just to really add on to it.
It's a very good action film.
I will admit, like, that scene with the train, unbelievably great. I just don't have much else to really say. Maybe the only thing I really can't say is, like, any action scene that happened after the movie is not as impressive because we literally just blew our load at the beginning. but maybe that's just a giant nitpick on my part, so I'm not going to delve too much into it. I will just give praise mostly to the train scene, which is in the first 10-15 minutes of the movie.
Yes, it is a very intense scene. I personally really like it, so.
Yeah. Alright, let's move on to the next one. Alright, our first animated movie, Ratatouille.
Yes.
Well, actually, second animated movie if you want to count stop motion.
I believe stop motion does technically qualify as animation.
Yeah, that is true. Alright, so Ratatouille. I guess I could talk about one scene that I really always enjoyed watching. The soup making scene.
Oh, yes, that is a good scene.
Yep. So, pretty much what happens is that our titular character, Remy, is scouring throughout the entire kitchen, trying to escape without getting caught. And pretty much he stumbles upon a soup that was originally like messed up by the, quote, garbage boy, or linguini, as he will be known as McCollum. And he completely remakes the soup, and it is one of the more, what is the term, satisfying scenes, I guess. The music's pretty good, the cinematography, or at least shot composition, is really good, and it's just a fun scene just to watch a little rat make a interesting soup. I've always wondered what the actual soup was. I never bothered to look it up, because I'd love to actually try it one day, but it looks like a white cheddar type soup with some green onions or something in it.
Yeah, so of Pixar's films, this is probably the most iconic, probably.
Yeah.
The only other one that I could possibly see being more iconic this is their first one, Toy Story. In which case, even then, like, I feel just about everyone knows the plot of this movie. Everyone has heard the plot, in which case it is a rat that controls a chef.
Yeah. Which is honestly like one of the weirdest plots I've ever seen Pixar do.
Yeah, it is a very odd plot.
I'm trying to think, is there any weirder plot that Pixar has ever done? That
all the humans are cars, and then one person apparently trying to win.
Do we really want to count Cars of all things?
Like, I mean, you asked for weirdest.
You got a point. I'm trying to think. Besides Cars, what is the other weirdest plot they ever did?
Nemo's quite odd. I don't think it's odder than Ratatouille, but it is odd.
Yeah, but I don't know. It's not the most unheard of thing in the world. Like, whenever you take the actual general plot, it's a father looking for his son.
Yeah, like if you boil it down, yeah.
Yeah. However, like, I'm meaning, like, whenever you boil it down to, like, a story or something like that, like, with this bare, basic stuff, Ratatouille might be, like, the weirdest plot I've ever seen.
Well, if you boil it down Ratatouille, it's about a mentor and teacher.
Got a point there. I think you got a point. Huh. I don't know really what else to say. Do you have anything else to say?
Oh, I'm fine.
Ratatouille. Go check it out. Alright, our next one. Alright, so this is Bryce's special movie right here. The Martian.
Yes.
Alright, so where do I see anything with? I like a lot of the scenery on Mars.
Yes.
There's really nothing really to spoil on that. There really isn't much anything to spoil in The Martian, besides saying, like, they do eventually save him in the end.
I feel the biggest spoiler here is that a surprising amount of things go wrong in this movie.
Yeah.
Because this movie does a very good job of portraying the idea of one step forward, two steps back, I feel. Because it happens a lot. Every time you feel like you're making progress in this movie, something goes wrong. It's just like, oh my god, please, just fix it, please. Like, it just leaves you on such a good hanger of like, okay, we're finally getting rolling. He's going to be able to get off the... Why? Please! This movie feels like a constant stabbing in your back of like, just, please, you can do this!
I don't know, like, that's mostly just like... Even still, like, that's just, like, a very good narrative trick to, like, get the audience to really start rooting for your main character.
Yeah.
In which, nothing wrong with that.
In which case, in my opinion, this movie, of, like, recent years, does one of the best jobs in making you want to root for the main character.
Yeah, I can see that. I'm trying to think of anything else. Like
also, good music. There's a lot of disco, so if you like disco, there's a lot of this in this movie.
It's not the Bee Gees, though.
Yeah, no Bee Gees.
That's the only disco I could ever enjoy. It's just the Bee Gees. Yeah, I have nothing else to say about The Martian. I don't really have a lot to say about some of these movies that are spoiler related. There are some that are later on in this list that I could talk more about. Bryce would pretty much know what they are, but without anything really, I have not much else to say. You have anything else?
The Martian just does a good job of getting you to root for the main character from disaster to disaster, and also very realistic movie.
Oh yeah.
Despite being sci-fi, it's probably one of the most realistic sci-fis I've seen in a while.
It was this movie, and I believe Interstellar, that is always compared between the two when it comes to interspace travel.
That's mainly due because Matt Damon's in both of them.
Oh yeah, that's right. He is in both of them.
So that's mainly why.
Well, I thought they came out around the same time.
They also did come around the same time.
So like
It's a Matt Damon movie where they came
what?
around the same time.
I would say,
in my opinion, The Martian's way better than Interstellar.
You know what? I would say I prefer Interstellar a lot more if the ending wasn't so bad.
Oh, that's mainly why I think Martian's so much better than Interstellar.
Yeah, like the ending for Interstellar.
Well, the reason why I think it's better is because, one, I'm not impressed by a lot of the planets. There's only one planet in Interstellar, because they visited quite a few of them. There's only one planet in Interstellar where I'm like, ooh, that's interesting. Well, the rest of them are like,
Which one is that?
The ocean one.
Ah, yes. I love the soundtrack in Interstellar, and in particular that planet. Whenever you hear the little clicking sound,
yes.
each click just symbolizes as 1 year on Earth being passed. And I thought that is awesome.
Yes,
it's like a token of Hans Zimmer's actual genius when it comes to musical composition. However, there are some movies where I question his reasoning. Maybe one day we'll talk about that, but not now. All right, moving on. Alright, so Singing in the Rain. Okay,
yes.
So Gene Kelly. Really not much really to spoil about Singing in the Rain, really, unless... maybe there's one thing I guess we can talk about. Moses. Supposes. Moses are roses. Anyway, yeah, so that scene is like... I actually like the scene a lot because in the scene, they are like... We have our titular character starring with Gene Kelly. He is like trying to practice his vowels and enunciations on words, so a way he can actually say them in a movie. So
yeah, so we were talking about earlier about the move from silent generation to talkies. This movie is primarily around that concept.
Yep, and pretty much it just turns into a giant musical number, just saying Moses supposes and Moses and woses and I don't know Moses, and yeah.
So. The main thing I want to get across with this movie, the story is extremely basic in my opinion, in which case it is guy wants girl, girl wants guy hates girl, girl hates guy, but there's a third party girl that really likes guy, but guy does not care for that girl, and then the whole love triangle affair, and mainly a bunch of music going around. My biggest criticism with the movie is that there is, in total, I believe about 3 songs, that really just sidetrack the movie. The worst case one is Dresses, in which case we're going into a scene, we're leading up to it, and then we get the Dresses scene immediately taking us out of it.
I honestly don't remember Dresses and all.
Yeah, Dresses is probably the most forgettable in there. That's my biggest problem with it. But other than that, it has very good music. If you're just once again, the story is not great. So it's not great. It's very generic. So as long as you're just here for the music and aren't caring about this generic story going on, then it'd be like dragging you in and out of the story quite often. You probably won't care about.
Yeah. I personally really like this movie still. Like I like a large amount of the music. I like the titular song "Singing in the Rain."
Yes.
Make 'em laugh. I even love Moses. I thought that song is a lot of fun and pretty catchy. However, "Make 'em Laugh" is definitely one of those songs that makes me get a little bit upbeat.
Yes.
So yeah, good music. Well, majority it's good music, but there are some songs that are a little bit forgettable. But
yeah,
I'm sure most people.
There's a lot of songs. This is a fairly long movie with a lot of songs, so
yeah,
it's not surprising that you're gonna get some forgettable stuff in there. Because this movie's well over 2 hours. I know that for sure.
It's not over 2 hours, but it's close. I don't know. All right, let's move on. Okay, now we can have some fun with this one. We are going with the Evil Dead 2.
Yes. So,
oh my god.
Sam Raimi, Evil Dead 2. This movie is just chaos.
Chaos incarnate.
So the first 5 minutes just recap the last movie. Like, you don't need to watch Evil Dead 1. The first 5 minutes just recap Evil Dead 1 by, like, having the whole movie compressed into 5 minutes. Not even, like, them just saying the movie. They took the entirety of the first Evil Dead and took it and compressed it into 5 minutes. It is just such a quick series of events to be like, bang, 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 bang. It's just like, whoa.
Wait a minute, so hang on. Like, doesn't this call into question, though, is Evil Dead 1 a bad movie? If you can condense it in that short of a time frame.
I'm personally not a fan of Evil Dead 1. It's not that I hate it. I just don't care for that type of movie.
Okay, so like, yeah. So Evil Dead 1 is more of the slasherist movies.
Yeah,
that actually is trying to scare you.
Yeah.
In which it's fine.
The biggest thing that the movie does is that the person who survives is not the person who you actually expect to survive.
Yeah.
Because they have the usual horror movie trope characters, but the character that you would expect to just kind of die in the background being like, oh yeah, I guess that character died, is the one that survives.
Oh yeah. Heck, I remember seeing a video that compared a remake of Evil Dead 1 to Evil Dead 1, the original, and I was like thinking at the conclusion, I was like, maybe Evil Dead 1's remake actually is probably a little bit better, because it does do the horror aspect better, but with Evil Dead 1, though, is like our favorite character in Evil Dead 2, starring Bruce Campbell, he is not the character that he will become in Evil Dead 1.
I disagree because Evil Dead, the remake of Evil Dead, it does all the same things that the original Evil Dead 1 does, except in newer graphics. But, you know that thing I talked about earlier, the one credit I gave it, where the character we expect to survive survives, that doesn't expect to survive? They take that, except they make it the typical horror characters, but the one we expect to survive survives. They do the thing, they've removed the one credit I gave from Evil Dead.
I don't know. I hadn't seen. I never saw the remake though, so I was just like thinking in the conclusion. I was like, maybe Evil Dead 1 remake might be okay, but I haven't gotten around to seeing.
I didn't like it. But Evil Dead 2.
Easy with the mic. You're kind of gonna break it through.
Evil Dead 2. Very good. It's very funny. A bunch of really creative scenes. At one point, we wind up getting a scene where everything in the house begins laughing, and it's utter chaos. This movie does such a good job of symbolizing insanity, in my opinion.
Oh, yeah. Oh, boy. Literally chaos incarnate is the best way I can describe this movie. It is chaos incarnate.
Great and on top of that, it's really effing funny.
Oh, without a doubt. Without a doubt. Okay, let's move on to the next one. Okay. Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory.
Yes. Just about everyone's seen this movie, I feel like.
Literally, I won't even bother spending 1 minute in this movie, like, talking about this movie.
Yeah.
Literally, almost everybody's seen this movie. If you haven't seen this movie, why? I mean, listen, like, is it an amazing movie? I wouldn't say so. It would still always be in my top 20 just for sentimental reasons. Like, I grew up on this movie quite a lot, and I love Gene Wilder too much to say I can never bump it out of my top 20. It would always sometimes lower it down. It would never be in the top 10. Never. Unless, for whatever reason, I find a weird appreciation for it. But, literally, watch the movie, for God's sakes. Good Lord, it's perfect for
if you're only ever going to watch one musical in your life, this will probably be it.
Yeah, the music in this movie is pretty great, except for one song.
Yeah, there's one song, in which case...
You will know what it is once you get to it.
In which case, this is a spoiler episode, so we can talk about it. It's Good Luck, Charlie.
Or no, Cheer Up, Charlie.
Cheer Up, Charlie, that's it.
Yeah, literally everybody, like, whenever I once searched up about Willy Wonka songs, there was a Reddit post I was talking about Cheer Up, Charlie, and literally everybody would say, like, this is, like, the slowest song. It's not a terrible song, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's, like, the most forgettable is the problem. Because it's just a slow song. They repeat a lot of the lyrics.
Yeah, it's not a terrible song by any means.
It's also, like, one of the shortest, it feels like.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just, like, one of those things that's, like, nobody really cares.
It's also by a character that doesn't sync with the rest of the movie.
Heck, they really don't even have that much of an actual role in the movie.
The longest role they have in the movie is this song.
Yeah.
Or as background, I guess, for another song.
Yeah, that's true. But, like, even still, like, the mom doesn't really have that much of a role in the movie, just besides being Charlie's mom.
Yeah.
And she really doesn't do anything else of importance in the entire movie. But, yeah, that's the only criticism of the movie that it really sticks out to me is just that one song.
There's also Grandpa.
Well, yeah. Literally, there's a YouTube video. I really need to make sure to remember sometime later. Is about this entire hate towards Grandpa Joe. There's literally an entire website that was made by two comedians that was like just nothing but Grandpa Joe hate, and it is honest to God, hilarious. And they're not wrong. Grandpa Joe is the biggest dick in the movie.
Yeah.
Forget about the kids just for 5 minutes and just look at all the things that Grandpa Joe had done in the movie, and it makes you think, oh my God, he is actually the main antagonist of the movie. It's literally hilarious. So hopefully I probably won't remember it, but please just look up Grandpa Joe hate Willy Wonka, and trust me, you will just find a large amount of media stuff related to him. It is really, really funny. Alright, let's move on. Okay, Back to the Future.
Yes.
Okay, so there really isn't that much for us to really exactly...
Well, I have stuff to say about it.
Well, yeah, you have stuff to say, but I'm saying, like, spoilery stuff, there really isn't too much really to say, because, like, everything gets revealed soon after we go to the 1950s, which is where the majority of the movie will take place at. But, yeah, go ahead, Bryce.
So, one of the biggest strengths that I feel about this movie that I didn't get to really tackle in the non-spoiler one is that the dialogue is extremely smart in this movie because every line has a goal. Every single one. And I feel that reveals a little too much for someone who doesn't want spoilers, but every line has a goal in this movie. So if you keep your ear open, they don't miss a line. So, for example, you can go to this movie, like, if you just grab the script or whatever, take it to me and be like, I'm going to open to a random page and point to a random line. That line has a purpose in that movie. Mm-hmm. They do a good job of setting up each individual things of either a line is going to build a character, is build an event, or it's going to wind up paying off.
Literally, this entire movie's script, you can actually look at it and pretty much deduce by, like... So, like, there's a common trope in screenplay writing in which it goes like this. If you have a gun in the third act, make sure to introduce it in the first.
Yes, Chekhov's gun.
Chekhov's gun. And pretty much, this entire movie is basically all of that. Everything is introduced within the script, and it will always be addressed sometime later on in the movie.
Yes, this movie is literally Chekhov's gun, the movie. Mm-hmm. It's just, they took like 20 Chekhov's guns, and we're like, we're going to use these throughout the whole movie now.
Yep. And that's what I really appreciate about this movie, is like, it establishes everything, and it makes sure everything is going to be used. And I unfortunately cannot say that really about the second movie, because...
Yeah, that's... the second movie's the weakest, in my opinion, because it does a very poor job.
Not even just that, the plot holes as well in the movie is really... It literally sticks out with you like a sore thumb. It's really unfortunate.
The strongest ones are the first movie and the third, but the third is just a weaker version of the first.
I would say it's just a guilty pleasure, in my opinion.
Honestly, I really love the third because the third was just a Western. Honestly.
I mean, like, to be fair, like, me and you, we enjoy, like, weird Western stuff like that. So, like, yeah, we both enjoy that, but the first one is easily easily the best one.
Yeah.
Second one, you can't really skip it because it introduces stuff for the third, so, like...
It's not a bad movie.
It's just, all the plot holes really does...
It's just a setup movie.
Yeah, it just hurt, like, a lot of the stuff...
Like, if we're going to talk about great trilogies, this one doesn't quite have the same weak middle as, like, Temple of Doom, for example. Because Temple of Doom, in my opinion, is the worst second movie of a trilogy. Because it's just really bad. If you haven't watched Temple of Doom in a while, it's really bad. Well, second Back to the Future, it's not that low. I feel it's like a fairly average movie. It has plot holes, but it still has funny jokes and lines.
Yeah.
It does good stuff with setting stuff up in the future, but it also has plot holes. It also is like, doesn't have the best plot, in my opinion. But luckily, the third movie, it can stand on its own as long as you watch the previous one. Well, I guess it's not standing on its own if you need to watch the previous one.
Yeah. Alright, so...
Yeah, that's the best about Back to the Future.
We're getting a little bit sidetracked.
If you want to watch just the first Back to the Future, it works. You don't need to watch the others.
Yeah. However, I still probably would say watch the other two because, like, Back to the Future is, like, one of the most iconic trilogies of all time, especially within the 80s, like, where the 80s was, like, a weird time in movie history whenever you look at what all these different movies are all about. But, yeah.
It was probably the best trilogy until Lord of the Rings came out.
Yeah, I believe that. I would actually probably very much agree with that. But still, Back to the Future, iconic. Probably the most iconic comedic trilogy of all time. So, alright, let's move on. Oh yeah, we were way overboard. Okay, so next up, Akira.
Yes.
Okay. We talked about the animation, so we don't really have to say much about it.
There's not really any spoilers on the animation now.
Let's talk about the plot and these characters. Oh,
yeah.
Sheesh.
So, my biggest problem with the movie is that clearly a lot of material was cut or unfinished when this thing went to air.
Yes.
In which case, the worst offenders about that is that there are several characters within the movie that their motives appear almost intentionally stupid. So one of the worst offenders, I believe they're like the governor or mayor or whoever, they're like the main authority figure. At one point, they wind up getting themselves killed because of something they knew about and something they didn't know about they were going to go do. They were like, oh, I'm going to go do this thing I shouldn't know about. But I was also know about this event that's about to occur. So it looks like they just went to X place to get themselves killed. So it's just like, whoo.
So yeah. We talked about this last week with Akira, and a lot of the stuff was cut. And I found out, like, after we were done with the episode, I decided to look up and how long this whole entire comic was being made. Yeah, literally sandwiched in between was when the movie came out, and I just thought, I started to think, I guess the ending was just a test run for the original creators to see if the ending would work. I don't know how much the difference of an ending was. I will probably recommend it for... I don't really know how to go with that.
Very beautiful looking movie. Beautiful. The problem is the story was definitely not complete when this thing got made.
I still think the movie is still pretty great in some of the certain scenes. Like, how about this? Like,
there's still strong scenes in there.
Oh yeah, like in the beginning of the movie where we have like the main group.
The beginning's probably the strongest.
Yeah, like we had the
that's
main.
Probably the part that was talking about.
Literally the introduction to all of our characters, and they're going through the streets and stuff. You can just sit back and watch the animation and just these characters relating to one another, and it's like, wow, this is pretty cool. And it just sets up for a lot of interesting mystery behind the movie, and it's just like, then it starts to think, okay, I'm kind of confused, and then the ending is like, what the hell happened? I'm very, very
It's
confused.
not even... I don't even feel the movie's too confusing. I just feel the movie didn't think about it itself. Because when I sat down and watched this movie, it felt like the movie didn't think about very particular things. Because it was like, okay, we need to focus on the animation and then maybe the writing. And then when it got to that scene, it was like, okay, what are we going to do here? And then someone went, well, I guess this makes sense. And it was like, does that make sense? Does it? Or they were like, okay, we need X thing to happen in the movie. How do we have that? It's like, oh, we just have that happen.
Oh, yeah.
And it's just like, that needs a little setup.
Oh, man. I really wish I had more to say about Akira. It has been a bit since I've seen it.
Yeah, the animation's the strongest part, which is we can't really talk about that.
Yeah, we already talked about it already, but it's like the story is like, it's the weakest part about it.
Yeah.
Beginning is pretty strong, though.
The beginning's real strong.
Yeah, but then it starts to take a little bit of a nosedive when it tries to branch off of what it wants to talk about.
Yeah, the movie does a bad job of building itself, in my opinion.
I mean, heck, like, we go from all these different things, and then all of a sudden we have, like, a nearly post-apocalyptic, another post-apocalyptic thing, since it kind of did happen in the beginning, like a giant explosion happened. But, yeah. Alright, so let's move on to the next one. Okay, there's really not a whole lot. I mean, Princess Bride.
Yes. I'm probably not going to say a lot about this.
No, not really.
This is just a fun tale. A grandpa's reading a story to his grandkid, when he's sick, and he winds up winning over the kid with the story, and the story has lots of twists and turns, a lot of small...
It's more of a fun little subversive fairy tale story.
Yeah.
It doesn't follow a lot of the tropes. Heck, it makes fun of some of the tropes.
Yeah.
And really, that's pretty much all I have to say.
It's just a fun movie. If you have a kid or you're looking for just a fun movie to sit back and enjoy... This is one of those movies that if you ever are looking for a good kids movie, either to show your kid or you're just wanting to enjoy a good kids movie, I highly, highly recommend this. Matter of fact, this might be my highest recommendation for something like that.
Yeah, I can see that.
It's just a fun movie, period, dot.
Yep. There's really no even issues with the casting. Like, literally the kid actor is just fine.
Yes.
Everybody that is casted in this movie is pretty great. I mean, this movie is very much iconic for a lot of very good reasons. Heck, they had a huge reading about, like, they were reading out the script a couple years ago when the pandemic was going on.
By the way, the actors for this movie effing love this movie.
Oh,
the actors for it love it.
Heck, Carrie always loves to tell stories about being on the set, like talking about Andre the Giant. The one story I always remember about from this movie was how Andre farted for 15 seconds straight, and somebody yelled out and asked him, "Are you okay, Andre?" And he said, "Yeah, boss."
The actors love this movie, and you can tell there was so much love put into this movie because of it. So.
Oh, without a doubt. Okay, let's move on. Okay, Blade Runner 2049.
Yes.
Okay, so we kind of hinted at some of the things about last week, and so I guess we could talk about this a little bit. So this is technically considered a sequel for the original Blade Runner, so you definitely want to watch that one before you check this out.
Definitely want to watch it, but I recommend it.
It would be recommended, but like still, there is stuff that is established in the first movie that does carry on to the second one.
Yes.
Heck, whenever I was rewatching it, I was thinking I'm kind of forgetting small details from the original Blade Runner, so I really needed to rewatch it.
In which case, the main thing about this, if you just watch this movie and you're like, this is an odd detail, why is that there? Probably because of the original.
Yeah. However, that does not really change much on my overall opinion on the movie. I still think that this is a phenomenal movie on its own right.
Yeah.
In which we talked about a little bit last week on how people of like today will be saying like, oh yeah, have you seen Blade Runner? And they like some people are going to ask, like some of the people from back then, they're going to ask, oh, which one? Are you talking about the sequel or are you talking about the original? However, nowadays people are probably might start to say, oh, Blade Runner from 2017 as being considered the original Blade Runner. However, even still, the original Blade Runner is still amazing on its own right. However, I put this one on here because of how much it took the original Blade Runner and added in more that made sense to it.
Yeah.
That's what I love about this one. And also,
this is a good example of a sequel expanding upon the original, opposed to just trying to either remake the original or attempt to do something.
The question is like, does it rely on the sequel? I mean, the original? Not really. It complements it a lot.
Yeah.
That's what I really look for in a sequel, is that it doesn't rely too much on the original, but it would complement it a lot.
Yeah.
That's why I personally want more out of sequels, especially ones of older properties, in which it doesn't rely on the source material and you having to have like weird nostalgia for the original. So what is a good one, for example? Okay, like Ghostbusters, for example. So Ghostbusters had another movie come out in 2021 in which I watched it, and I thought I didn't really like it because it relied so much on your nostalgia for the original one, and it didn't really complement it that much.
Did that come out in 2021?
Yeah, it did. It came out in like September or something like that.
Oh, I could have sworn it came out earlier.
Nah, it was like either 2020 or 2021.
I could have sworn it came out in like 2019.
No.
Because I could have sworn it was pre-pandemic.
No, it wasn't pre-pandemic. I knew it came out during the pandemic.
I might be thinking of a different one then.
Probably. It may have been that one with the all-female cast.
Oh, are you not talking about that one?
No.
Okay.
No. I'm talking about the newest one that they did.
Okay,
No. Like, this one was, like, dealing with, like, the Ghostbusters kids involved.
Oh, okay.
That was the one I'm talking about. Not, like, the 2016 one. That's a different...
Okay, I knew it was earlier than that.
No. That's a different one that I would talk about something else with that. I have different criticism on that one. This one with it is, like, it relies so much on nostalgia for the original one, in which it's just, like, scene after scene of, like, revealing, like, oh, here's the car, and here's the type of tools that they use. But it's, like... It just relies so much on your nostalgia for the original one that it just doesn't complement it, and it's like it just feels like nothing but nostalgia bait for your audience, and that's why I didn't really like it that much. I gave it a 4 out of 10.
Yeah.
So pretty much is like whenever I talk about sequels with people, it's like it depends on how long ago that the original one came out. So if it complements it but it doesn't rely on your original love for the movie, you're going to have a good sequel in hand. Unless it's something like Lord of the Rings, where it's a large overarching story in which you have to rely on prior events to go with it, then yeah, that'll work. But if it's something like Blade Runner, where the original one works on its own, but you make a new one that will complement the original, great sequel. That's what I believe this one perfectly did.
Yep.
All right. You have anything else, Bryce?
Nope.
All right. Let's move on. All right. Drunken Master, or Legend of Drunken Master, or Drunken Master 2.
Yeah.
Yeah, good lord. Okay, so I guess there's only one real fun thing we can spoil about this movie. Let's talk about the last major fight scene in the entire movie.
Well, I was actually going to mention the story.
Okay. Oh, yes, let's talk about the story.
Because I know you want to talk about the story.
Yes, yes, I do. Okay, so pretty much I am somebody that loves to delve into some interesting stories, and this one has one of the more fascinating stories that it tries to come across, and it does it pretty well and very, very subtly. So this is a movie that literally is unapologetically against the West.
Yes.
And by the West, I mean Western countries like, say, Europe and the United States.
Yes.
And it is very anti-colonialism, and I just thought, oh my god, it actually was unapologetic. Like, it did not half-ass it at all. Like, there's subtle lines in the dialogue that is like, wow. So, Bryce, you want to mention some of the dialogue pieces? Because I'm pretty sure you might remember the dialogue better than I could.
Yes, I remember some of the dialogue, but I don't want to, like, straight up quote a lot of it. Because I feel the really strong part about this is just watching the movie. I feel as long as you sit down and watch the movie, the general story is a lot stronger than the actual individual dialogue pieces. Because I'm going to misquote them. I know I will.
Okay,
so I recommend watching the movie.
So there's one quote I can think of immediately. So Jackie Chan's character asks one of the main antagonists, is like, why are you doing this? Like, shouldn't you be helping your fellow countrymen and being patriotic? And fighting against these foreigners. He didn't use the exact term foreigners, but I guess he probably meant, like, say, invaders or something like that. And he said, oh, I don't care about that. I just care about making money.
Yeah.
In which, wow. And there's another dialogue that was, like, I believe he was saying something to the effect of learning about my culture in another person's country.
Yeah.
In which, yeah, that's very much...
Oh, I remember that. That was probably one of my favorite lines in the movie.
Yeah, literally, like, we see that nowadays with a lot of, say, former colonized countries, like, say, in Africa.
Yeah.
Which
is probably, like, one of the worst offenders.
Yeah, one of the worst offenders. Great job, Britain, you fucking bastards. Anyway, essentially, yeah, like, this movie is very much deals with this entire thing of being anti-Western imperialism.
Yeah.
In which, yeah.
And it does all of that with being a great background movie. If you don't want to hear any of that story, this movie can be played in the background.
Yep.
And just has a great, like, fight scene to fight scene to fight scene.
Yep. I wanted to mention about the fight scene at the end of the movie, but you know what? Now that I think about it, I'd rather not spoil it. You need to see the ending fight scene. It is
this is a spoiler cast, and we're not wanting to spoil it. That should be aside from how great it is.
Literally, the ending fight in this entire movie, it is just...
In which case, there's a reason why I said that this movie convinced me that Jackie Chan is on the level of Buster Keaton. And if you don't know who Buster Keaton is, he is defined as the greatest stuntman in history. He was the person who probably single-handedly made probably film to its standard, because he was capable of escalating the idea of, like, slapstick comedy and being able to have it be actually clever and interesting and being able to weave that through, and was able to do that in the silent film era.
Oh, yeah.
And it is effing high praise when I am able to compare someone to that scale.
Yeah. Ooh, boy. Yeah, not much really else to really say. I guess one thing I can say about with Jackie Chan, don't watch a lot of the movies that are, like, made by, like, Hollywood or something like that. I personally am not a big fan of Rush Hour, for example.
If your only experience is Jackie Chan in America, you're doing an extreme disservice to yourself. And I mean an extreme disservice. His Hong Kong work is unbelievable.
Mm-hmm. Alright. That's all I have to say about that. However, now let's move on to the next one. Alright, another fun one that me and Bryce love. Grand Budapest Hotel. So, actually, believe it or not, Bryce, I rewatched this movie just the other day with a friend.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so my friend, hi Leanne, so pretty much she actually asked me about different movies that I would recommend, and she's one of the people that was really excited for this podcast. So pretty much we watched the Grand Budapest Hotel. She's never seen it.
Okay.
And everything else. And at the very end of the movie, you know what she said?
What?
It's one of her favorites.
It is so good.
And I was thinking, yes, great.
I believe my synopsis of it last episode was very good. It manages to both be a masterpiece in critique work and a masterpiece in audience work.
Yes.
Typically with movies, they either are going to, like, really heavy favor one over the other. Typically, you're going to see this around, like, different seasons. So, for example, modern day, summer seasons, that's pure audience work, while winter season, that's pure critical work. Because audience work, that's blockbusters, that's when the kids are out of school, that's when parents can take them. That's when pure audience work's going on. Winter work, that's when, like, the Academy Awards and the Globes are going on. So all the critical work's coming out, so you can appeal to all the critics.
Yes.
That's when you see that kind of stuff going on. But this movie manages to balance both of those so well. The effects are so unique and interesting. The camera work is absolutely jaw-dropping. The characters are hilarious. The dialogue strings together absolutely amazingly. And it does all of that with having an absolutely bonkers story.
Oh, without a doubt.
And on top of that, surprisingly star-studded with people you don't think would be in this movie.
Oh, man. So, like, one of my favorite things about this movie is the portrayal of friendship.
Yes.
Literally, probably the most important theme about this entire movie is the ideal of friendship. And literally, our two major characters, Mr. Gustav and Zero, literally destined to be friends no matter what. And I just love to see their dynamic between the two. I mean, heck, they have a giant age gap between the two, but they are just, like, literally just perfect for each other. They're like a match made in heaven.
Yes.
Oh, man. Literally, go check this movie out.
It's so good.
I was so happy to finally show the movie to my friend, and like just hearing her just laugh in different points of the movie, and just at the very end, like we had other people in the voice call talking in the movie too, and like everybody was just really enjoying themselves, and I was like, I'm just happy to see this. The movie is just a very happy movie, even though the ending is a little bit upsetting. It's still happy just to know that a friendship like that existed, and the memory that can continue on from that. It's just an all-around good piece.
This is one of those few movies, and I mean very few movies, that I could probably recommend to just about everyone I come across.
Oh, but
There's very few movies that I can genuinely be like, I think this person would like X movie, because eventually they're going to find, like, there's going to be some movie that I'd recommend everyone that I'm going to be like, I don't know how much they would enjoy this movie. Grand Budapest Hotel, legitimately one of those movies being like, I think they would enjoy that.
Yeah. Oh, man. Alright, let's move on to the next one. Okay, now we're going to get a little bit dark here. The Thing.
Yes.
Okay. Oof. I guess there's only one scene that I can get across with why I think this is the best suspenseful movie or best horror movie in general. The blood test scene.
Yes.
This one is literally peak, edge on your seat, skin crawling. And pretty much this entire scene is like this. We have our characters that are trying to find who is the Thing.
Yes.
Like this giant alien that is just inhabiting each of them by hosting it. And they figured out one way to figure out in who is the Thing is by testing the person's blood. Because the Thing can inhabit the blood and it can recreate itself. It's like its blood, it's like its own entity. So they would heat up a little piece of like iron and they would just test samples pieces.
In this movie, it is defined as this creature will do anything it needs to survive. And by getting the blood out, that kind of makes its own little creature. So if you burn the blood, like what they were doing, that would functionally kill the creature. So the creature would do anything in its possibility, now that it's out of the body, to survive. So they were taking little sections of it, trying to kill that, and if it didn't react, that means they were fine. But if the blood reacted, that means that little creature came from another one of them. So that means they found the host. Mm-hmm. And through this scene, they're sitting there, and they don't even know if it works yet. And they're doing this little blood test scene to be like, little suspense, before they find the sample, and even chaos ensues.
Yeah, and even then, like, whenever it gets to the reveal of who was the Thing, it's actually pretty much a jump scare, because, like, we didn't expect this person to be the Thing, because, like, our main character is, like, saying, like, you are going to be last, because I think you are it. Yeah. And then right when he did it, it's like, boom! And that's when they had no time to really react. Like, everything just turns into chaos. And it's like...
And this also does a good job for the rest of the movie, because it really sets up how smart this creature is.
This creature is incredibly smart.
And just a little bit of warning, since we are doing a spoiler cast.
Yep.
This movie will end off on, I shouldn't say an unsatisfying, but you are not going to feel like, oh my god, this is over, the movie's over. No, this movie ends off with still its suspense going. So when this movie ends, you're like, oh, effing crap.
Literally, the ending of the movie is like peak nihilism, and it's like there's no real winners in the end of it, because in the end of the movie we have two people that survive, and it's like they're still going to die in this, because like
even then it's debated if they really did survive. Like it's still those two.
Yeah, I know, like, but like, I mean,
you're not going to get real answers from this movie. By the way,
there really is no real answers in this entire movie, and heck, probably one of my favorite parts of the movie is like the very ending credits of the movie, where it's like, it's the heartbeat, but it sounds off enough to make it feel alien.
Yeah,
and it's just so perfect. Literally, the entire soundtrack of this movie is just good and is just like unhuman.
Yeah. And also, just to give another layer to this, just to show you, like, how complex this movie is, there is still people to this date trying to track the series of events to be like, okay, here's the host, it went to here, person here. It's like, this thing is not only very smart, but it's like, okay, here's, like, the series of events, and people debate over the events that occur quite often, be like, well, at the end here, we can see this person might have been the host, and it's like, no, that doesn't work, and then you, like, it's so interesting. It's such a smart movie because of it.
Oh, yeah.
That people debate constantly just over the ending.
Oh, yeah. I'm trying to remember. There was one other thing that I thought I could mention about this movie, but I really can't.
And obviously, special effects great.
Yes. Well, we talked about that in the spoiler stuff, or non-spoiler stuff. However, yeah. Check out this movie. I mean, hey, if Twin Groovy Men was the longest one that we ever talked about on a movie, The Thing would be second close to none. It is just that great. All right. Move on to the next one. All right, The Lighthouse. One of the probably the most recent movie of the entire list by far.
Yes, I believe it is.
Yep, starring Willem Dafoe and Robert Pattinson. So, is there anything spoiler related that we can talk about in this movie?
Okay, so I do have a couple of spoiler things to say for this movie.
Go for it.
So, a lot of this movie is going to be going over a lot of basically kind of mental. How do I say this? It is.
Mental anguish, probably.
Yeah, and also just kind of the idea of being alone. This idea of not having anyone there for you for a long period of time, what that kind of really does to someone. In which case, this movie kind of really tackles that kind of stuff and has a lot of surrealist aspects going around it. But there's a lot of weird stuff that also happens. I feel the movie really shows that kind of stuff towards the end of it. My biggest problem with the movie is that there's a couple of times where they decide to put in effects that I feel don't really not that it doesn't work, but I feel was unnecessary. Because the movie is trying to be a lot of like, ooh, that's weird. Why are these people doing this? And being like, okay, what's happening here? And you're trying to figure out this kind of stuff as these people are basically going insane. But by throwing in these very particular things, it kind of like, I don't like it. Like, for example, when they're talking about the light of the lighthouse a lot. The lights, and there's one particular scene that I am not a big fan of where he is going up there, he's trying to look up to find the guy, and we see a scene where he turns into an octopus. And I'm just like, that only happens about twice in the movie. I only have 2 examples. I can give you a second example if you really want. But those are the 2 weakest parts, but the rest of the movie is very interesting for that, where it's like, so there's a lot of interesting complexities going on through this movie for something like that. In case you're curious what the second one is, it's The Mermaid.
Yes.
Very similar reasonings for that, except instead of being interest into the actual light, it is for the lust over an artifact. Mm-hmm. But yeah, that's like the main things I have to say about this movie. It's interestingly complex. There's only 2 times I would say it really throws off the audience in a bad direction.
Okay. I really have not much else really to say. A lot of these movies, it's been a while since I've seen them. I would like to rewatch The Lighthouse. I have seen it quite a number of times, in which I always find a weird, interesting, like, symbolism inside of the movie. Like, somebody once marketed this movie as, like, the next 2001: A Space Odyssey. That is so pretentious to say. However, I only say that because 2001 is heavily debated on what is the meaning behind this movie.
I feel that's so stupid. It's literally said in the book.
Yeah. But with The Lighthouse, is like a lot of people are searching for different answers. Like there's one about, what is it? Is it Prometheus, the name? Like the one that is like pushing the... No, it wasn't Prometheus. It was the one...
what's his name? Prometheus is the fire one. What's it called? Sisyphus.
Sisyphus, I think it was the
Sisyphus.
one... It was the one where he's getting his body pecked at by birds.
Oh, no, that is Prometheus.
Oh, then there we go.
I thought you were talking about... You said pushing the boulder. I was like, oh, you're talking about Sisyphus. No, Prometheus, that's the one who stole the fire. They chained him to the rock, and a bird came down to eat his liver every day.
There it is, yeah. That's the one I was thinking of. Because mainly everybody's talking about at the very end of the movie where... the character of Robert Pattinson, he is getting pecked at by seagulls for, the entire rest of the movie. And everybody's, like, thinking, okay, there's probably some symbolism about that. Like, the fire is the lighthouse, pretty much. So what could the lighthouse pretty much mean? Is it, like, unknowable knowledge? Does it represent God or anything like that? And there's a decent amount of symbolism that you can derive from this movie. I mean, the realism stuff, Not into much of surrealism, but I think the surrealism works better in The Lighthouse because we only have two guys literally in a lighthouse and on an island far off from civilization, in which it should drive you mad at some point.
The surrealism... So I'm very critical about surrealism movies. And this... one of my biggest critiques about surrealism is it has to have a purpose. You can't just have surrealism in your movie and be like, it's surrealist, isn't it cool? Either, if you're going to do that, your entire movie should be surrealism. I'm talking like Man with a Movie Camera levels. But if you are going to wind up doing something like that, you need to have a purpose. And this movie does have purpose because the surrealism ramps up as they become more and more insane. And one of the parts that I enjoy the most about it is they almost entirely drop the surrealism by the end of the movie, and you're just seeing these two people acting insane. And it's very interesting because of it.
Oh, yeah. I have not much else to really say. I do recommend seeing The Lighthouse. It is a very fascinating movie. And I am very much still a very big director of Robert Eggers, the director. He made a new movie that came out this year called The Northman. Still haven't seen it, but I'm very curious to see what it is. I do know basic plot points on it, so maybe sometime I'll talk about it in the podcast, but not today. Alright, let's move on to the next one. Alright, this will be fun. Alright, Die Hard.
Yes.
Oh boy, oh boy, oh boy.
Just a fun action film. Probably, in my opinion, one of the best action films.
I would definitely much agree with that. I'm not a very big fan of action movies, but this one is probably an exception to the case. I think this is probably one of the fun ways that you can do an action movie. And it's still pretty funny to me how he goes barefoot in the beginning of the movie. It is
starts with almost literally nothing.
Yeah.
But this movie is basically about a woman. She winds up going to LA to get a very high-end job. This guy from New York, he's a cop, winds up to go visit her for Christmas. They are in not the best marriage right now. You understand both sides of them because it's like, this woman is there to get a good job because she really cares about it, but she's also acting, not unfaithful, but she's doing stuff that looks extremely unfaithful, and the guy is getting very defensive about that, being like, hey, why are you getting rid of my last name? We're married, and stuff like that. He's having a lot of interesting stuff about that, being like, this seems like some sort of betrayal to me, and she's like, I'm just doing this for my job. And so you get this interesting relationship where the two just aren't communicating very well. And by the end of the movie, we are wind up seeing all these action sequences to wind up building up the story. I very much like the actual idea behind these guys because you get this great fake out with the villains where it's like, oh, these guys are supposed to be terrorists. No, they're not. These guys are just bank robbers. They're pretending to be terrorists because people will just presume they're terrorists, and they can wind up getting away with a lot of surprising things because of that.
Mm-hmm. Oh, man. I really don't have much else to really say about Die Hard. I just think like it is one of those movies that I think really shouldn't be spoiled too heavily much.
Yeah.
But it is definitely one of those ones where it's like a fun action movie that is like, you'll just have fun throughout the entire thing. So really do check it out, and I do believe it is possibly the best acting, at least, of Bruce Willis, when he actually did seem to care.
Yes, because this is like, I wouldn't call his first movie, but I would call this absolutely his star-breaking film.
Oh, I can definitely agree with that. Alright, so next one we should talk about The Green Mile.
Yes.
Alright, so, let's see. I believe we could talk about the scene where you initially walked into when you first heard about this movie.
The only scene I ever seen for a very long time of this movie is the electric chair scene where they didn't wet the sponge. And it's probably one of the most gruesome scenes in the whole movie.
Yes.
I remember one time telling that to someone before I watched Green Mile fully. I said, oh, the only scene I watched ever was electric chair scene where some guy was being electrocuted for a long period of time.
Yes.
And they were just like, oh, that explains a lot.
Yeah. So let's just talk about
I believe I was about 5 at the time, 4 or 5.
Yeah, let's probably tell a little bit about what the story of The Green Mile is. So, if you don't know, if you've never seen The Green Mile, so pretty much this is about an entire jail area where it is men on death row.
Yes.
And we have our main lead character starring Tom Hanks, and the newest inmate is a very large African-American man, standing well over 6 foot.
Yep.
very big man. However, he is more of a gentle giant more than anything, and he is sentenced to death by apparently killing 2 young white girls, in which we find out later in the movie that he did not kill. It's actually somebody else who is in the entire jail that I believe he will be sentenced on to death row.
Yes.
But he's eventually killed off later on when we find out later the entire truth pretty much. However, the strong point of the movie is I love the performances of Tom Hanks and the man who is playing the titular giant man, African American man. I can't remember his actual name right now. I believe it might have been Thomas.
Something like that.
Yeah. However, I guess we should talk a little bit about the interesting piece about the movie, that it is a Stephen King movie. And if you know anything about Stephen King and his, more or less his, usual cliches, I guess you could say, of, what he likes to write. I mean, we all know the usual ones. The main character is, say, a author. This movie is set in Maine and other places. However, it doesn't follow that. However, there's one that it does not actually follow that is pretty interesting. And it deals with the topic of religion.
Yes. So typically in Stephen King movies, he is extraordinarily critical of Christianity. Almost to the point of, a cartoon villain levels of, critical. Where there will be characters who are Christian and they'll be the main villain just because they're Christian.
Yes.
And in this movie, that doesn't really happen.
No, it's more of an appraisal to Christianity. So the new inmate is actually seen as a giant miracle of God. Yes. He has abilities that are able to, say, drain out evil or consciousness from people. He can drain out diseases or anything like that. He even cures a certain, I believe he was a lawmaker or he's a very important official in the state of Louisiana where this movie takes place at. And
are you talking about his wife?
Yes, his wife.
Okay.
That is dealing with a tumor in her brain, and it's slowly killing her. And there's a scene in the movie where he actually heals her. Pretty much this entire movie is just pretty much dealing with a miracle of God that is brought upon and a warden that has to eventually execute him.
Yes.
And it's an entire moral dilemma of this entire movie. The
only Stephen King-ism that I feel is really in this movie is his style of mysticism. Because he does have a style of mysticism, and this style is within that, so... also, this movie does have, a pseudo twist to it. It's not really... It's more just involving the healing the ultimate what happened with the healing process. Because it gets revealed more details about the main character and stuff like that, so...
Yeah. Anything else you have to say about the
No, not really.
It is a very solid movie, though, and it is something that I do recommend to people who are checking out. And there's another movie that we will talk about later that does share a lot of the same similar appraisals that we have towards this movie. So, yeah, check it out. Green Mile. Alright, let's move on to the next one. Alright, so this is a very interesting piece here. And we hinted at it a little bit, so I guess we could talk a little bit more about it. Lawrence of Arabia.
Yes.
Okay.
Long movie.
Very long.
I think it's the longest movie on our list.
Very long movie indeed, yeah. So, this entire movie... It pretty much takes the story of Lawrence, who was
I believe it's one of the only 2 movies with an intermission.
I think you're right, actually. Yeah, I
believe it's this one and Gurl.
Okay, Bryce. Very funny, very funny. Okay, so yeah, Lawrence of Arabia is based off of the story of Lawrence, or T.E. Lawrence, as he is more well known in the UK. And it's pretty much where he is sent off in World War I to the Arabian Peninsula.
Yes.
And he's trying to settle a giant conflict that is going on between a bunch of different tribes in Arabia and the Ottoman Empire.
Yes.
So this entire thing is they're just trying to reclaim land and all this stuff in World War I. And it is very fascinating, but it is more or less of a critique on the idea of, quote, being a conqueror. And then even much more stuff on saying, the, what is it? I'm thinking of, the critique of, going on a grand adventure and becoming a legend.
Which a lot of World War I was advertised as.
Yes. And, well, it very much advertised on you going on an adventure, and you would see the world and stuff, but once you get there, it is... Yikes.
Yeah.
it isn't as gruesome as, like, say, it could be, but it does highlight a lot of the trauma that our main character of Lawrence goes through.
Yeah.
In which he, at the beginning of the movie, he's very much excited, and he's very much
one of his opening lines, well, not opening, but like one of the lines, he's like, "Oh, are you sure you're prepared for this, Lawrence?" Like, "Are you kidding? This will be fun."
Yeah, and that takes a nosedive very much towards when we get to the intermission part of this. So with Lawrence, he is very much like trying to seem like a major folk hero, and he's like pretty much like a weird like character. Like, I'm not just like, no, not caricature. He is very much like a sort of like of a comedy like it's just like more like a spoof. Like a spoof of a generic adventurer, but then once he gets to where, like, say, in the movie, he has to go and rescue somebody out in the middle of the desert where it is, like, a very dreadful area, and he finds out that there's somebody that is, like, lost there, and they might end up dying there. He decides to say, I'm going to be a hero and go save them. And right when he does save them, and he is seen as the hero. Eventually he has to kill the guy.
Yep.
Because he actually killed somebody. And that's the general rule of, like, if you kill somebody, you're going to be killed too. And once he finds out that it's the same guy he literally had just spent, he almost lost his life to save, he has to kill them instead. And he has to face that reality. And you see it in the facial expression too.
The actor for this, for Lawrence, is not only a spitting image, but is absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, I believe his name is Peter Toole. And he did eventually, I believe, win the Academy Award for Best Actor in this.
Good.
In which he pretty much should have anyway, so literally it was perfect. His entire casting is just pitch perfect.
This is also one of those movies, they're tackling a lot through this, and it's also through a very long process. So it's not going to be something you're going to get immediately. I feel it's a very hard movie to understand on first watch. It's one of those that I would recommend watching twice.
Yes.
So if you're prepared to sit down for, 4 hours, then a second 4 hours,
yeah,
don't watch them back to back. I would think that's absolutely insanity.
Yeah, you would literally waste an entire day watching this entire movie.
It's a really good movie. So
it is a great movie, but it's like, good lord, is it very long. That's the only thing that really hurts the movie, in my opinion. But if you just have the time to watch it all the way through in just one go, trust me, it tells
a great tale through such an interesting scope and scale.
Yes.
It is probably one of the best epics that I've ever made, in my opinion.
I can see that. Or at least I can agree to that.
And this movie makes me sad that Hollywood just refuses to make epics nowadays.
Well, I mean, good lord, they do make epics nowadays.
I'm not going to count those.
I was making fun of Marvel movies. I don't really consider those epics.
No.
Alright, let's move on to the next one. Alright, so let's move on to the next major epic in this movie. Monty Python and the Holy Grail.
Second intermission.
I hate you so much.
And this is the last intermission.
I wish I could fire you, but really I can't.
I mean, you already fired me. You fired me at the start of the episode.
You're rehired. Anyway.
Oh, man, I'm co-host again. Wait, who am I rehired as?
Cabin boy.
Cabin boy? Why do we need a cabin boy?
I don't know. Go clean that mess up right over there in the corner.
It's not a mess over there, though.
Exactly.
You just gesture to a door.
Anyway, Monty
You can't
Python
just gesture off screen and pretend. Don't blow past this. This is important.
I'm blowing past it already. Anyway.
Anyways, I feel like it's a good interaction of what this movie's about.
essentially, this is literally that entire exchange. That's pretty much what Monty Python and the Holy Grail is. It's like they'll call attention to something and then they try to blow past it, and it's like, wait, you can't even just do that. It's like right there. Literally, that's the entire thing about this movie. Pretty much everybody's seen this movie at least at some point in their life.
If you haven't seen it, this is an absolute must-watch. If you have a group of friends, I would highly recommend watching it with them.
Yes.
If you don't, even then, still great alone. This is probably... I said this last time. If someone came to me and was like, okay, aliens have came to Earth, and we need a comedy. They requested a comedy to be taken to them. What the F do we bring? I would probably think about it for a second and go, Monty Python, the Holy Grail.
Good luck getting that past India and China, though.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah. Definitely go check this one out, without a doubt. There's not really much you really shouldn't be spoiled by this movie. maybe one or two scenes, but I don't really think that's really worth it. So, literally, my thoughts on the Holy Grail. Go check it
Now
out.
I'm just trying to think, what movie could I... Because I don't watch a lot of Indian comedies. I'm trying to think. Three Idiots, maybe?
I've never seen
Could we
it.
get past it?
I've
India?
never
But
seen
even
it.
then,
I've never seen
you
a
need to have a
Bollywood.
lot of information about India for that one to work.
I'm a big fan of India-related stuff, but I've never seen a Bollywood movie.
These are pretty good. Those are pretty good. I think I might actually have a Bollywood movie on my top 20.
Okay.
So, I might do the revisions. Spoiler alert for that. I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm still rewatching some movies for that, so...
Yeah, I've just been going through a bunch of stuff on my IMDb for that. Yeah, but that's a little ramble from us right there. So, all right. So next one, Groundhog Day.
Yes.
All right. So, what can really be said? I mean, we talked about the whole religious like symbolism aspect into it, which I personally don't really care to go too much into it. If we ever went back to this movie on a later on full on episode where we could talk more about this in depth, I will love to talk more about the religious aspect, but let's try to talk more about the store-related aspect, or if there's really not much else to really say, we could move on, but I'm pretty sure Bryce has way more to say than I ever could.
It's just a funny film.
Yeah.
It's technically a holiday film
Yeah.
for Groundhog Day.
Should be a world holiday. Hey, we could talk about this, though. So with Groundhog Day, it's very weird on how it was marketed outside the U.S.
Yes,
it's really, really weird, because, like, in everywhere else in the world, Groundhog Day is not a thing.
Yep.
And, like, I'm trying to think, like, what were the other titles that they had?
So, for example, if you want to go look up the listings for this, you can. But in, like, I believe in Germany, it was called The Day Back or whatever, heck. But, like, in different countries, they called it different names. And this movie is probably one of the movies with the most amount of different names.
I would not doubt it.
Because every country had a different interpretation on what to call this in their language.
Yeah. It's just weird like that. I really don't know how to really describe it. It's like, I mean, we're both Americans, so, like, we could not fully grasp that type of thing. So, like, I don't know, like, maybe pluck a random holiday from, like, say, Italy, for example, and try to market it for the United States. Then we can get close to that, but I don't know of a single one that's like that, in all honesty.
But yeah, very funny film.
Very funny.
This is probably, in my opinion, one of Bill Murray's funniest films.
Yeah.
I don't really have...
Especially one that actually he gave a shit in.
Yeah.
Because I could tell he pretty much enjoyed this entire script from beginning to end.
Yeah, and this movie also has a very interesting tonal thing going on about it. So, this movie just starts off with him just being an absolute a-hole. Just absolutely unlikable. And as the movie goes on, you're seeing a lot of interesting aspects about that, because he begins, like, being like, oh yeah, I've got to enjoy this. This is an opportunity, before he, like, begins going into it being like, let's see what I can do. I'm going to try seeing where does this line break? How broken can I get this thing to be? Before eventually, like, winds up looping into being like, I don't want to be in this anymore. I don't know how to escape it. And then he's like, well, clearly death's the only way out. And even then that doesn't work. And it winds up going into this interesting thing where it's a very interesting take on the idea of the 5 stages of grief, in my opinion. Because this movie does it very well.
That's actually pretty solid, actually, yeah. That's actually another fun interpretation about the movie. There's a lot of interpretations you can have with it. I mean, we mentioned the religious aspect to it, but there's also just, like, little random ones that you could just think of, and there's really no incorrect interpretation to the movie.
Yeah, this movie... just about anyone can watch it and take away something different than, like, for example, me and Tanner, if we never went into this movie, like, talking, we decided to go in and be like, okay, first time watching it for the both of you, we would have came, and we weren't allowed to talk midway through the movie, if we came out of this movie and, like, what did you take out of it, we would have taken out completely different experiences.
Yes. Well, without a doubt. There's not much else I can really say. Just go check out Groundhog Day. This is one of those fun movies that literally you don't even have to watch it on Groundhog Day to enjoy it.
Yeah, no.
You can watch it on a winter's day and it's just perfect. Or even on a summer's day like today.
Yeah.
I mean, good lord, it's actually nice out today.
Good thing we're inside.
Rip. Anyway, let's move on to the next one. Alright, so this one is centered around one of my favorite times of the year, Halloween. Alright, so where do you start with Halloween, really? In a spoilerly fashion, at least.
So first thing to talk about is this movie is definitely lower budget.
Oh, without a doubt, lower budget.
In which case, they do an interesting job with that. Most particularly is going to be with the villain.
Yes.
In which case, I believe the process was a Captain Kirk mask.
Yes. Yes, I remember how they did this. So they went to a costume shop, bought a Captain Kirk mask, painted over the eyebrows, and messed up the hair and spray painted it all white. And that's the Michael Myers iconic mask that everybody and their grandma's ever seen. In which, yeah, it's an iconic look. And yeah, they bought the Boilerman suit and some boots, and yeah, give him a kitchen knife, and boom, there you go. You got yourself an iconic slasher villain forever.
Yeah. And in addition to that, this movie wound up setting a lot of the stables going into slasher films for the future. Because
Yes.
though this was not the first slasher film.
No, it wasn't.
We actually had a long conversation about what was the first slasher film a
Yes.
while back. And,
Yeah, I said it was Black Christmas, so it wasn't set in Halloween. Black Christmas is a very fascinating slasher movie, in which, especially with its ending, in which I do have it set on the list at some point for the future. I hope to have that out for Christmas if we ever get around to doing it during that time. But yeah, like Black Christmas is what I would say is probably the first slasher movie. There's probably another one that I'm not thinking of from beforehand, but
in my opinion,
Halloween is the one that started most of the
Yes.
trends that you would see in it.
my quick 2 cents on this, I feel the first one was still in the black and white era, because I feel even something like Most Dangerous Game could probably qualify for something like that. So
Oh yeah, that's right. You did mention that. So like, I have to maybe one day I'll pull up a piece of paper that like different tropes of the slasher movie, and then we can try to compare and see, does the Most Dangerous Game count as a slasher movie? Which
Yeah.
I'm dubious to say.
yeah,
it
I'm
does.
dubious about it as well, but I definitely feel there's a movie in the black and white era that counts.
Yeah.
But I'm using Most Dangerous Game as an example because I feel that is close.
I
at
thought
least.
about one other movie now that I just thought of, House of Wax. The original one, at least.
Okay.
That's probably one I could think of as seeing like as maybe as a slasher movie, but it's been so long ago
Yeah.
since I've seen that one. That one's bad in some areas, but it's actually good in some areas. So.
But regardless,
Regardless, Halloween, yes. Very interesting direction. And like this is a John Carpenter piece, and it's not his best one, no doubt. However, this movie
Yeah, we already
is
talked about the thing.
yeah. However, there even is still like a large amount of inspiration from the original thing from
Yeah.
the 1950s that is actually in the movie. Like heck, in inside the movie, in one of the scenes, you have the original thing in the television.
Oh yes,
that's
I believe
watched.
you talked about that to me.
Yeah, it was like a very funny tidpiece. And it's like, and even still, like the thing is still somewhat of a small inspiration for Michael Myers in some way.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
It's not a good movie. And it's not perfect, I should say. There's only two things that I could say that are good about Halloween, and that would be the performance of the psychiatrist or the doctor, starring Peter Lawrence, and the handling of Michael, or at least the handling of like the mystery surrounding Michael is like they don't go too far into explaining his motives or anything like that. That's just good.
I think it's a fine movie, but then again, I'm not a big fan of the slasher series.
Yeah.
Matter of fact, when the only other movie that pseudo is slasher on my list is Evil Dead 2, and
That one is just more or less of a comedy.
yeah, in which case I have, when we do my revisions, I might have an actual another slasher movie on there, but even then, very similar vibes to Evil Dead 2. So just a little hint for that as well.
Okay. Let's move on to the next one. Okay, so now we got our Western here. The Good, the Bad, the Ugly.
Yes. Second longest movie on the list, I believe.
Yes. In which this one is actually a lot more easier to watch all the way
Yes.
through than compared to Lawrence of Arabia.
Because Lawrence of Arabia is a lot more hearted, while this one is a western.
Yes.
This is just action.
Yes. So I guess I mentioned this. Well, I never really mentioned it in in the last episode, but I've always loved to talk about the scene, especially. So it would be the graveyard scene.
Yes, the graveyard scene is very, very good.
Yes. And pretty much we have the song where it is, I'm trying to remember what it was. It was only a female singer that is just like, no real lyrics or anything. It's just harmony. And it's just one of our characters that is running through a graveyard trying to find the supposed treasure. This entire thing. No dialogues being said. Nothing is going on. It's just that we see this entire man running through a graveyard, and it's just nothing but anticipation, searching for this giant treasure. And
By the way, little things
perfect.
on the music of this movie. A lot of people singing not a lot of words being spoken from the singing.
Yeah, it's like people just doing harmony or a cappella, really. That's all it really is.
Because the most famous one, wow, 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 woo!
There's literally, there's like no spoken words or anything added, but
yeah,
like, you get the motive going on, or at least like the tone in the movie with the music.
Because I remember timing this 10 minutes into the movie, first word spoken.
I honestly think that's just one of the strongest aspects. It's like it knows how to
how to build this movie, and you're having so much being built, and it's going to be a surprise when the first words are spoken. Because it's very interesting. So much is being built, and then someone says something, and it's like, oh, wait, crap, someone actually talked! Like, this movie built so much without saying anything, and it's so good because of that.
Yeah. It's like, it just goes to show it how, like, a good screenplay can do without any words being spoken. Is like, you understand just, like, who these characters are just by not having anything spoken. And, like, that's just the epitome of just, like, of a good screenplay on its own right. Alright, is there anything else?
And on top of that, in my opinion, very, very good Western. It does a lot of things that are very different for a Western, though.
Yeah. Like, I remember once thinking about it, and I thought, is this probably could be considered a deconstruction of the Western? Because the good part of, so this movie's called The Good, the Bad, the Ugly, in which each character can be considered as good, bad, and then, of course, you got the ugly guy. The good guy
Which it's like ugly, but more just kind of the in-between.
Well, even still, like, that's how he's just described or whatnot. Like, he has a face only a mother could love. But, even still, like, the good guy is still not even entirely good.
Yeah.
He's just, like, a titular, like, heroic character that is still, like, doesn't even feel like a hero. Like, he just, like, toys with certain people, and, like, especially with the ugly guy, and, like, he just toys with them.
So,
especially to the very end.
The best way to describe this, I feel, is the good, which is the stereotypical Western hero, but how they would actually act if this was a real, like, it was really in the West, where it's like, that's kind of morally gray, actually. Then we got the ugly, who is, like, the stereotypical Western villain.
Yes.
Who is more just kind of like, oh, I'm here to, like, rustle some jimmies and whatnot, but it's like, actually, if it was set in the real Wild West. And then we got the bad, who would actually be the real villain in a real West, like, in the actual West, they would be the real villain.
If anything, he would just be considered, like, an actual legend of the West.
Yeah.
He fits that description pretty perfectly. Alright, but I really have not much really else to say. Hopefully one day we could actually talk more about this movie and its other two movies.
I wouldn't be surprised if we wound up having whole episodes dedicated to a lot of the movies on this on these lists. So.
Yeah, I wouldn't either. However, still, just check out The Good, the Bad, the Ugly. It's great.
Yep.
Alright, let's move on to the next one. Oh, right. The Shining.
Yes.
Do you really want to go over this?
I'll go over it quickly.
Go.
So, this movie does look very good. It does have a lot of the problems that I have with Stephen King still. Stephen King does have his problems, from obvious things. We talked about Stephen King problems. It does have Stanley Kubrick things. I feel the beginning is weaker. We talked about with what's his name, Jack Nicholson. Jack Nicholson.
Yes.
Are you just gonna sit there and stare at the camera the whole time? Or are you actually gonna talk to me?
That is actually gonna happen. I was thinking, like, do I really want to talk about this movie? But yes, okay, like, look. So Jack Nicholson is the one that is actually starring in this movie.
Yes.
However, I guess, like, the main thing we could also talk about is the treatment of Shelley Duvall.
Yes, I want to talk about that most.
Yes. Which one do you want to talk about first? Jack Nicholson?
So let's talk about Jack Nicholson because he portrays his character very interestingly in this movie.
Yes. So,
I want to portray Shelley Duvall last.
Yes. Okay. So let's talk about Jack Nicholson first. So the thing that I think about, like, with Jack Nicholson is, like, his entire appearance. It is perfect for a crazy man.
Yes.
However, he is impossible to take seriously as an everyday straight man.
Yeah, which leads to being a very weak start because we're supposed to believe he's a fairly normal guy with just some minor anger issues.
A former alcoholic.
Yeah, and he just looks insane throughout this whole movie, and it's like, I don't believe for a second that he is in this, like, because it's supposed to look like the very stereotypical sitcom kind of family, or it's like, oh, the spitting husband and the wife that's supposed to be, like, backlash at him, and the little kid that's supposed to have all of this happening around him. No, it's they're trying to build this as if it's the Honeymooners, and it's not.
Yeah, it doesn't work.
And
However, once we get to Jack Nicholson
Yes.
breaking, he's perfect.
I feel like when they did casting for this, they only had him breaking. They did not have that beginning part.
Yeah.
Because he's not capable of portraying himself as a honeymooners type of character, but he is capable of portraying himself as, like, what he is best known for, like doing the Joker or One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, where it's this absolutely nuts person.
Mm-hmm.
Then, secondly, I want to talk a little bit about the conflict between Stephen King and...
Well, it's more or less not Stephen King, actually. It's
Stephen King and Stanley Kubrick.
It's more like Stanley Kubrick. Oh,
Yeah.
I thought you were talking about Shelley Duvall.
No, I'm talking about Stephen King, Stanley Kubrick. They clearly did not have a good relationship. There's a lot of conflicts that happen in this movie.
Yeah. Me and Bryce had an idea for a movie of, like, it would be, like, an entire comedic joke about the conflict between Stanley Kubrick and Stephen King, a conflict of two egos.
Yeah, because you can tell there were two egos going on in this movie, because there was a lot of conflict going on between this.
Yes.
And just to show you how big the conflict was, I believe Stephen King wound up making his own Shining after this.
Yes, he did, and I did see that one, and it is. The only good appraisal about it is it actually has a better main guy character, like Jack Nicholson's character.
He is more believable as a family man.
He's more believable, but he's not scary when it comes to the psychotic stuff. That's more or less for Jack Nicholson, but as an actual straight man, like honeymooners type, he works pretty well.
He works as a honeymooners type. And then finally, before I get to that, I want to tackle the one last thing. The surrealism in the movie, not a fan. It's very sidetracky, where it's this kind of like shock factor surrealism, which is, in my opinion, the worst. I hate shock factor surrealism. I really hate shock factor surrealism.
I can only think of one, especially of like the bear and the guy.
That is the worst offender. It's really bad. The second worst one's the ending to the movie with the picture.
I don't know if that's really as bad.
It's bad, but it's not as bad as the bear. The bear is the worst. In which case, there's a butler getting a blowjob from a bear in this movie.
Yeah.
And it's bad. Then finally, let's talk about Shelley Duvall.
Oh boy, this is one of the most interesting, like possibly the most controversial part of this entire movie. So if you don't know, Stanley Kubrick pretty much abused or assaulted Duvall throughout this entire movie. Yes. He would berate her about some of her performances inside of the movie, and just all around just treat her like garbage.
And it leaks into the performance very heavily.
Yeah.
It leaks
especially whenever he made them retake scenes again after again after again. And it's like, you just see nothing but the sweat, the tears, and the exhaustion that they had. It does translate well into the movie, but good lord, once you know about the context of what happened before the scene, it just makes it all uncomfortable.
Yeah, so the one I also know about is the scene where they're breaking down the door with the axe. Stanley Kubrick wanted to get a better scream out of her, so he would begin abusing her, and if he didn't cut the scene, like, if she didn't give a good enough scream, he would do it again. And it gets to the point where she's genuinely screaming, where she's like, I'm actually terrified of Kubrick at this point.
Yeah. It does translate really well for the movie, but good lord, is it really worth it to get all of that and to like almost pretty much mentally break her, because she wasn't really the same afterwards. Like, I mean, even to this day, like, she is not doing the best, and I feel it's so bad for her.
And we also get scenes because of clearly some of this stuff was filmed before the beginning of the film, because films aren't filmed in order. And so short sessions at the beginning, you can feel at the very beginning where it's doing the classic honeymooner stuff, where Shelley Duvall is supposed to be giving normal dialogue about Jack Nicholson, but she just feels like she's scared of something. And sure, that might be fine for the movie, but to me, it just feels like she is scared of Kubrick. Like, she's on the same set as him, because she's supposed to be sitting there smoking a cigarette, but she's sitting there being like, yeah, he's fine. And it's just like, you're terrified of something an unnecessary amount. I feel it's just because Kubrick's overwatching you right now.
Yeah. It's not much to really say about The Shining. It is just like one of those movies that I don't recommend too often.
Yeah. Also, one last thing. The ending's a bit of a joke. Smash cut to frozen Nicholson.
It's frozen Nicholson. Alright. Let's move on to the next one.
Yes.
Alright, so this one is a very interesting piece here again. Leon the Professional.
Yes.
So yeah, I mentioned this last week on the episode where I was amazed by some of the dialogue from our main antagonist of the movie. And
So first off, director's cut.
yeah, director's cut.
In case you're curious, I'll go into a little bit about that. Director's cut almost entirely removes the scene of the father's execution, which is very good because that's also where you get the whole dialogue about between like why he likes Mozart so much. And we also wind up getting a lot of removal scenes of why the girl Natalie, or I believe her name is, isn't it?
Well, Natalie Portman is the actress.
Yeah.
It was Matilda.
Matilda, that's it. I was remembering the actress name. I couldn't remember the actual character's name. Is like they also removed a lot of the scenes where she's getting like actual personal like talks with him, because they just wanted it to be business, and by the end of the movie, kind of just feels random as to why she's so attached to him. The director's cut I feel is far superior about that, because they actually wind up having a very interesting father-daughter relationship, and the girl just doesn't understand how that works.
Yes.
And it's very interesting because of that. The villain is absolutely spectacular. There's a tiny twist. It's not really about what the villain's job is, because you kind of just presume he's a drug dealer, but it becomes a little bit more obvious as it goes along.
Yeah, it ties into how he is a part of the actual law enforcement area of New York City,
and the girl is wanting to get rid of him.
Yeah,
and killing a cop's a bit of a hard job.
Yeah, pretty much. So all around though, I still found this movie to be very fantastic. The best part, in my opinion, is the relationship between Matilda and our titular character Leon.
Yes.
And of course the antagonist. It's all around like the holy trinity of like pitch perfect casting on each of their part.
Main cast, supporting cast, antagonist.
Perfect.
All perfectly casted.
Yep. Yeah, pretty much that's all I have to really say.
And I also really love the ending to this movie. Very beautiful.
Yeah.
Really ties down to the idea of being able to grow this character.
Oh, without a doubt.
Alright.
Alright, let's move on to the next one. Alright, so this is actually my favorite movie of all time, which at least it is nowadays. The Great Dictator, starring Charlie Chaplin. So, there's only one scene I guess I gotta really spoil about this movie, in which I don't want to, which is why I say skip to a few minutes after this, because I don't want y'all to spoil it on your own, but at least let's talk about the speech.
Yes.
The speech is very iconic for a lot of things. However, it's more so iconic for the real life because it got Charlie Chaplin kicked out of the United States.
Famously, I believe in one of the theaters, I might be misquoting this, or it might be inaccurate, but if I remember correctly, at one point during the airing of this movie, people apparently bought tickets to get into the ending of this movie and brought in a crate of vegetables, just so they could throw it at the actual screen, as if this was old stage, because this was an older film. This is a very famous idea. If a bad play was going on, you would bring a crate of vegetables and throw it at stage.
Yes.
Particularly rotten vegetables.
Yeah.
And they wound up doing that just for this movie, which is one of the few times in, outside the silent era where people genuinely haul in rotten vegetables to throw it at a movie screen.
So unfortunately, honestly, a lot of my personal beliefs and how I see life, or just anything really, I say the speech is probably the perfect summation of what I personally believe in and how I view humanity. And it's yeah, I personally love the speech so much, and it just pains my heart that one of the greatest silent actors of all time, the one time he spoke, left everybody speechless.
Yep.
In which I hate to hear that some people failed to understand his message, and instead of praising him, kicked him out of the United States.
Yeah, so Charlie Chaplin, famous comedian, the silent era, played the Tramp, a small little guy with a hat and mustache, and a dirty suit. Did a lot of comedy stuff, and people wanted him just for that. And the moment he tried to bring out a message, people, one, didn't agree with it, and two, were annoyed that the funny comedy man was trying to talk to them.
Mm-hmm. They missed the entire point.
Yeah.
At least that's what I would just pretty much submit.
And then, secondly, this movie is, it tried to very much inspire, going through the middle of this movie I'm particularly talking about, but the problem was it wasn't fully understood what was happening during this time, because this is set during World War II, this was filmed during World War II.
Yes. However, we did not know the full scale of what was happening Like it tried to make fun of Germany during World War II, and which it's pretty good for what it was. However, it did not understand fully, and it's not Charlie Chaplin's fault. That should be understood. It's not his fault.
We knew that the Jews were being mistreated.
Yes,
but we didn't know to the scale they were being mistreated.
Yes.
So the movie is just presuming that they were being moved to the ghettos, and that was it.
Yes.
That was the end of the story. That's not where it ended. Yeah. And this movie is just presuming that's where it ends, and there's one character that doesn't age well, particularly for that, because there's this one girl that talks about revolution. We need to overthrow them. Yes, we're in the ghettos, but we can still overthrow them. And that character doesn't age very well.
No, it does not. And, well, pretty much I can talk about this. So, a few years after the movie was released, and after World War II was done, Charlie Chaplin was in an interview, and they asked them about the movie, and then he was talking about it, and he said, I have heard that Hitler, who the movie is pretty much making fun of, he did see the movie once, alone. And there was no anything written down of, like, what was his reaction to it. And Chaplin was quoted as saying, I would give anything to know what he thought about the movie.
This movie lays into him.
Yes, it really lays into him, but then there's one, probably the most standout thing that he ever said was, if I had known what was actually happening in Germany, or at least in Europe, during the time that I was making this movie and during World War II, I would not have made this movie.
Yes. So, I would like to think of this movie more as, because this is a very good movie, more just the early stages of that start. So opposed to, like, because they didn't move to camps very quickly. Yes. There were stuff going on there, but the camps weren't going on from the get-go.
No.
They were beginning to move them from the countryside to the city, and then from the city to the ghettos, and then from the ghettos.
Yeah.
So I like to personally think of it more as this is the in-between stages, but that also doesn't really help the one character, so...
Yeah.
But with all that said, it is still a very fascinating character, still a very fascinating movie, with some very interesting things that are being said, and a very interesting story, because ultimately the story is about a Jewish man saves a German soldier, and that German soldier winds up getting very heavily promoted, and winds up saving this one Jewish man as much as he can.
Yep. All around, I still say, it's one of my favorite movies of all time. It is probably number one. However, sometimes it makes me question, should I have it at number one? But at the end of the day, I always think about the speech, and it is possibly the most important speech, or at least important monologue in a movie ever. So all around, just please seek this movie out. It's great. All right, let's move on to the exact opposite of a portrayal of World War II in some capacity, Schindler's List.
Yes.
So I really don't have much to really say about it, because we did mention this last week on the episode in a non-spoiler fashion, and this is a movie that I really think it shouldn't really be spoiled too heavily much, because like everything you need to see is like taking in from first hand and just try to get into.
I'm not going to spoil this movie simply because go and effing watch it, for one.
Yes.
And number two, I'm just going to give you some facts to keep in mind while watching this movie.
Yes.
Number one, this is a true story. 100% true, and they tried to keep it as accurate as possible. They had actual people from these events telling their story from it, and this is several thousand people telling their story from it. Mm-hmm. So they try to tell it as accurately as possible from the actual people who experienced this. Mm-hmm. Number two, the actual director for this, which is Spielberg, did this basically for free.
Yep.
He donated everything he could to the survivors of the Holocaust.
Yep.
And still, much of the money made from the movie is still donated to the survivors of the Holocaust.
Yep.
So, if you pick up this movie, some big blockbuster company is not going to be getting your money. The survivors will be.
Yep.
So, if you're picking this up, this is basically a donation. Yep. I recommend it. So, unless you're picking it up secondhand.
Yeah.
Then in which case, obviously, the person who had it's getting it.
Yeah.
They're not going to go donate that money for you.
Yeah, pretty much. However, all around, it's still
and
worth the seeing.
One last thing I do want to say is that in two little things about this movie. When Spielberg was making this movie, apparently he had such a hard time making this movie because of how emotional he got over it. He contacted a comedian, and if I remember correctly, the comedian's name was Robin Williams, to assist him with basically cheering him up to
keep on finishing up this movie.
Yeah, in which case, at one point, he said that he doesn't think he can finish it, and Robin Williams had to sit him down and be like, this movie is too important to give up.
Yep.
And finally, last thing I want to talk about, John Williams does the score, in which case, Spielberg sat him down, had him watch a few scenes, and John Williams said, I do not deserve to do the score on this movie. You need a better composer, and Spielberg responded with, I should, but they are all dead.
I do have another like World War II related movie that is in my revised top 20, in which we are going to talk about it. I'll also explain more like why I didn't put it in the revisions, like at least not put in the original one. Bryce probably knows what it might be actually, which I'll ask him later after we're done here. But
yeah.
Even still, like World War II is a very pivotal moment for filmmaking in general. I mean, we've seen many different ones: Saving Private Ryan, I mean, Schindler's List, Great Dictator, all these different ones. Yes. Schindler's List might be the best one of all of them, hands down. It's really hard to top this one.
Yes. So, of the best of the genre, we're like, a lot of people think World War II has some of the best movies of all time. This is probably the best of that.
It might be. So, definitely stick this one. All right, let's move on to the next one. All right, so Princess Mononoke, our final animated picture,
yes,
and our only anime one related on this. So,
and created by Studio Ghibli.
Yes.
Which both me and Tanner have a lot of great things to say about Studio Ghibli.
Oh yeah.
And this is when I'm going to get into because it's a spoiler cast. I'm going to talk a little bit about the one problem I have with Studio Ghibli.
Yes.
And so I'm going to get this out of the way, so that way we don't have to talk about it for the rest of the podcast. Is Studio Ghibli has this one problem in a lot of their movies where they, for some reason, want to force a love story. And I feel about 80% of the time it doesn't work out.
Mm-hmm.
This is one of the few movies where I think it's, for the most part, fine.
Yeah. I mean, it's established early on in the movie. And it does it fairly well. It doesn't really delve too hardly much into it.
It's not quite on the levels of I Love the Rivers levels. Which I think is one of the dumbest things. But yeah, the biggest problem I have with the movie, which is my second biggest problem, is I don't like the treatment of nature. So this movie treats nature very nicely until the end of the movie.
Yes.
Because it feels like they gave a little too much favoritism to humans. Because this movie tackles a lot of the ideas of humans versus nature and where's the middle ground. Where's the middle ground of that? And it's very fascinating. And in my opinion, I would have made the fight a little bit more, not even, but like, I would have made this fight a little bit more, I guess, yeah, even. Because, yes, man can want to destroy nature quite heavily, but that has a playback, consequences on man for doing so. And it doesn't feel like man is given enough consequences for that. Because in this movie, a lot of the nature characters die. And I mean a lot of them.
Oh, yeah.
But not very many of the human characters do.
At least, like, how about this? Human characters that we've known from the beginning and then all the way to the end that we actually care about. None of them really did die.
Yeah, which I guess could be argued because it is a film for kids. Are you really going to kill off most of the cast?
I wouldn't say the movie is for kids, though. It's rated PG-13, and it actually does deserve its PG-13 because there's like blood.
Yeah.
Shoot, somebody gets decapitated in the movie and lose their arms. So this is more this really draws in the fine line of it. I mean, if we talked about something like, say, I don't know, like Spirited Away or something like that, where it is kid-friendly to a good extent, this one is really not kid-friendly in a lot of ways.
Yeah, this is, of the Studio Ghibli ones, I guess, a lot more gruesome.
Yeah. So, really, I don't think the whole thing of like, oh, it's for kids really works out with that.
Also, another thing, we talked about this last time, but because it's a Studio Ghibli film, everyone should at least watch one Studio Ghibli film.
Yeah.
It's up to you whether this would be a recommendation.
I personally love this movie quite a lot.
Yes.
It does a lot of fun things with Japanese folklore, like Shinto, that it really does very well on, since Shinto deals a lot with nature and nature worship, that I'm very, very interested in.
Yes.
So, I say do seek this one out if you are not very much into the gruesome aspect of this movie. Might I recommend other ones, like My Neighbor Totoro, which does the whole Shinto nature-loving aspect that it does.
Yeah, so I feel the four, there might be more, so you can comment on this. But since we're talking about if you're going to watch a Studio Ghibli one, watch at least one of the ones that we're about to list here. My Neighbor Totoro, Princess Mononoke, Spirited Away. I'm sure that you're going to recommend Kiki's Delivery Service.
That isn't really much to delve into Shinto-related stuff, but I'm
talking about just Studio Ghibli.
How about this? Studio Ghibli in general, yes. Kiki's Delivery Service, Spirited Away, Princess Mononoke, My Neighbor Totoro. What is the other one that I thought was...
Princess Mononoke. Oh, I guess you said that.
I already did, yeah. There might be other ones. Maybe one day we'll talk more about...
Howl's Moving Castle?
Oh, yeah. Howl's Moving Castle. However, there is something about Howl's Moving Castle. I will have it on a, future episode thing that we'll talk more about it later. I don't think Bryce has ever seen it.
I have never seen Howl's Moving Castle.
Okay, what do you know? I know one movie that is a little bit of a fun one that I think Bryce will very much like. The Cat Returns.
Okay.
I think you're going to like that one a lot because it has a certain actor that you're a big fan of.
I presume. I think you told me about this before.
I think I did as well. I know we've watched Whisper of the Heart at one point. I barely remember that movie, so...
Same.
Yeah, we'll watch it at some point again, I guess, later on. Maybe one day we'll have an entire episode where we talk about our favorite movies from Ghibli, if we ever...
Cough, that's already on the schedule.
Yeah, I have a feeling it is on the schedule, so either way, yeah. Princess Mononoke is my favorite one out of the entire ones, but any Ghibli movie I'm sure you're going to have a large amount of fun with no matter what.
Yep.
They're good. It's a good studio.
Yep.
Alright, let's move on to the next one. Alright, so here's another fun one. Mad Max, Fury Road.
This is so good.
Yeah.
It's just... Imagine someone took an adrenaline shot and went, I wonder if I can apply this to 45mm film.
Essentially, yeah. That's this entire movie in just a nutshell.
This movie is a film put on steroids. Almost literally. It is bonkers. So, I talked about this last time where the entire movie was storyboarded before it was written. And this movie feels storyboarded. It is crazy because there's a couple of lines in this movie. You probably could fit all the lines on this movie on 3 pages. This is a very quiet movie because it gives a lot of its leniency to the action of this movie. And in case anyone doesn't know, this is a Mad Max film. There's other Mad Max movies. You can't skip them. This movie does a good job of setting it up to stand on its own. Because they just automatically presume, because this movie was made 20 years after the last one, they are just automatically presumed none of the audience is going to see the older one, in which case the last one was Thunderdome, and that one was a bomb, if I remember correctly. So, yeah, they were just like, okay, none of the audiences are going to see the older one, so we're just going to make a new, standalone Mad Max movie, and it's, oh my gosh, if you want a movie that you are going to be literally unable to breathe throughout the whole thing, this movie's it. Because this movie will just have you just sit there unable to breathe, being like, oh my god, oh my god, oh my god.
Literally took the words out of my mouth. I really have nothing else really much to say about it. I love this movie to death. I saw it in the theater, and my god, this movie was just fun.
Yeah.
So literally, go check out this movie. There's really... I don't want to say much about it because every little thing in the shots of the movie is something that you'll find something really funny or interesting about it.
Also, so another thing I will say is the surprisingly good world building.
Yeah,
very good world building for an action film.
Yeah, and it's in a very short amount of time whenever you think about it. So, yeah, definitely go check this one out. All right, let's move on to this fun one right here. So this is another black and white movie. Young Frankenstein.
Yes.
So Mel Brooks.
Directed by Mel Brooks.
Yep, one of the biggest inspirations of me and Bryce.
Yes, absolutely. Love Mel Brooks. I sadly didn't put any Mel Brooks movies on my list, which I am super saddened by, because I was going to put Young Frankenstein on mine, but yeah.
I beat him to it.
Because we wanted to have our list be different movies, so that way we could talk about 40 films opposed to us. Because we were going to share some films, we were going to share Grand Hotel, The Thing.
Yeah, but there's also... Oh, yeah, in the revisions list, that a little bit of a spoiler, I guess, there are some overlap.
Yeah, we're for the future ones, we don't mind having overlap. It's just this episode, we didn't want to have overlap.
Yeah, so, pretty much, yeah. What can we say about Young Frankenstein? Hilarious.
Yes.
Great cast.
Yes. So quotable.
Very quotable.
So quotable. I use several of the quotes. Some of the ones that stand out are particularly ones from Igor. In which case, I'll go ahead and give some of them, which is... Werewolf. Werewolf, werewolf. And then, oh man, what's another one? It's hang your eyes, too late.
What hump?
What hump?
Oh, wait,
You're shouting. Why are you shouting?
Manduka? Oh my god, Ovaltine?
Destiny! It's destiny!
Oh,
Can't escape destiny!
Oh my god, what is this other one I'm trying to remember?
And there's also one at the start where he stabs his leg. What is it? His research was doo-doo!
My grandfather's work was doo-doo!
Yeah.
I have no interest in death.
Only in the preservation of life!
Yeah, the only thing that concerns me is the preservation of life!
And now hop off of there. Good hopping.
Oh my god, very large, Schweinton? Woof. It's going to be quite popular.
And then obviously anytime sex happens, they all sing the exact same song.
Well, it's either oh yeah, that's right. That same song.
Because there's not technically not sex scenes, but it's implied characters have sex by them always singing the same song.
Literally every time. It's freaking hilarious. Literally, just go check out this movie. It's just laughter from beginning to end.
It is ridiculously quotable. Mel Brooks, one of the most brilliant comedian directors of all time.
Still living. God bless that man.
Fun fact, by the way, whenever you finish a certain movie series, I am immediately going to show you one of the Mel Brooks movies. I'll tell you more about that later, but some people can probably deduce what that is.
Oh boy.
So.
Alright, let's move on. Alright, so here's another long one, but it's still a very fascinating one. Another director's cut. Amadeus.
Yes, director's cut.
So believe it or not, Bryce, literally the other day, so the same movie with the friend that I was watching movies with, Leanne, hi again. We were watching Grand Budapest Hotel, and she said, let's watch Grand Budapest first, and then later on, we can watch Amadeus. And I thought, and however, she told me from the beginning that I was like, I have to go to bed at a certain time, and I thought, I don't know if you want to watch Amadeus.
Yeah, it's about 3 hours. So
yeah, I told her like, it was like close to 9 o'clock, and she lives in New York City, so it's like 10 o'clock there. I said, are you sure you want to do that? Because it's like, it's over an hour and a half of Grand Budapest, and then 3 hours of Amadeus.
Yeah.
Not smart, but I told her we'll watch the movie eventually, so stay tuned if you ever want to hear her thoughts on that. But
yes.
Yeah, so how do you really describe Amadeus? We did touch a lot about it from the last episode, which, even still, like, is there really anything spoiler-related that we could talk about?
So,
we could spoil a little bit about why is this the director's cut.
Yeah, so, once again, I've been doing it for all the director's cuts, so I might as well do this for the last one. In which case, they wound up cutting a few things, the most notable of which, they wound up cutting the scene where Mozart's wife winds up going to
Salieri's house
to have sex with him, basically.
Pretty much, yeah.
And she winds up revealing her top, being like, okay,
yes,
let's get down because I want my husband to have work, and teasing me like, that was a test and you failed. Get out.
Yep. He pretty much humiliates her. Like, of course, like, you see full frontal nudity, and that's,
yes,
well, at least top-wise. And that's pretty much all it is. Humiliates her, and that's pretty much, we get the main conflict between him and her. If you don't see the director's cut, it's kind of confusing. If I'm willing to presume, like,
yeah. So basically, what happens is they have that little talk, and then he goes into his room and burns a cross. So it feels extreme.
Yep, pretty much. It's like literally like him committing blasphemy, and it's like a major turning point in his character. Is like he prayed to God to create music, and now he's turning his back on God.
Yeah, so the movie is all about Salieri. He basically prayed to God to be like, by any means, I want to be your instrument. I want to have your glory by making your music. And winds up, like, getting rid of his father to be basically ensure that he can do all that. And then Mozart comes along. And Salieri is forced to feel envy.
Yes.
Even though everyone treats him as the better, he can't help but admire Mozart and feel like he is superior. Yes. Despite being, like, how he, like, prayed to God, I was like, I want to be your instrument, and it's basically implied God granted that.
Even giving up his chastity.
Yes.
In order to do that. And even still, like, he was very much treading on the line of wanting to actually do that.
Yeah.
And yeah, God was pretty much punishing him throughout the entire thing.
It's so fascinating. A man basically trying to fight God. And it is such an interesting conflict.
Like everybody's like, it's like a man versus man story, which is very simple.
Yeah.
However, this is more like man versus God more than anything.
And it's very fascinating to see this character, because he's a very smart character.
Oh yeah.
But he's sitting there trying to come up with plans to fight God, and it's very fascinating on like how he's trying to do that in this character. It's fully believable.
Oh, without a doubt. But yeah, pretty much, like, literally, like, if you have 3 hours to kill, please check out this movie.
It's very good. Watch the director's cut, though.
Yeah, director's cut. It adds in a little extra flair to it. It's not just, like, the whole idea of, like, oh, you get to see a woman's chest. No, it just adds in more a little bit, like, motivation. At least, like, adds in a little bit more, like, context.
You understand the character a lot more.
Yeah, understands the character way more.
And finally, last thing I want to talk about with Amadeus, it probably has one of the best endings in a movie of all time, in my opinion.
Probably, yeah.
Its ending is so good.
Yep.
Because you go from this priest sitting there being like, okay, please tell me your sins, being like, okay, you admitted to, like, doing this, I guess I'll hear you out, and it goes to the end where the priest is in utter shambles at hearing his confession.
Yeah. It literally destroys the bishop at the very end. It is, like, really intense.
Yes.
Alright, so let's move on to the next one. Alright, so our first Coen Brothers movie, and our only one on here, No Country for Old Men.
Indeed.
So pretty much, Bryce has some thoughts about this movie.
Yes. I only have one major complaint.
Yes.
In which case, my major complaint with the movie is the ending goes for too long. Because the ending goes for about 20 to 30 minutes. And that is like a quarter of the movie. And about 90% of its dialogue. And that's my biggest problem with it is, if you can make a good ending to a movie, you automatically are bumping up by a lot, because a good ending is extremely satisfying. But this movie does the opposite of where they had an ending there. They were trying to build to it, but then they wanted to send a message. And opposed to sending this message throughout the movie, they wanted to bookend the entire effing end of the movie by it. So I felt it was just bad blocking, in my opinion. But before you get to the end, if you theoretically want, you can cut the movie off early. But before then, the actual movie itself, going from beginning to then, so good. Because it is just a cat and mouse about two people trying their best to outsmart each other.
Oh, yeah.
And both characters, I wouldn't say they're brilliant, but they are definitely very smart.
I would honestly just say like this with No Country for Old Men, because it is technically a neo-western movie.
Yes.
So like you have like characteristics of each character into them. Like so, our main character is called Llewellyn. He is your stereotypical cowboy hero of this entire thing. And anytime whenever he does something good, something bad's going to happen. And this movie is incredibly unfair.
Yes.
And then with our main antagonist, Anton, he is basically our stereotypical antagonist, and he is one of the most calculated characters of all time. So, for example, Llewellyn is inside of a hotel, and he's trying to hide this a large case of money. This entire movie is surrounded about this case of money. And he is pretty much hiding it inside of a vent, and Antoine is tracked him down to this hotel, and he goes inside of a hotel room, which you think is Llewellyn's, but it's not. He's inside of a random, empty, vacant room, and he's just going around inside of it. And at first thought, you're thinking he's actually looking for someone. He's not. He's just looking around inside of a room, and he's just looking around thinking, where could somebody reasonably hide at?
Yes.
And I just thought, as I was watching the movie again, not that recent, but whenever I was rewatching it, I thought, this guy is the most calculated villain I have ever seen, and it treats its characters so well.
Yes. This movie does not only a good job of treating its characters well, it treats the story very seriously, and is capable of actually progressing the story in a very quick pace, interesting manner, where it feels like the characters are actually being given serious justice. These aren't characters that are making choices just to progress the story. I genuinely believe these characters are doing this.
Yep. All around, like, this is the most serious Coen Brothers movie that you would ever find. The Coen Brothers are very great at taking folktales and translating it into a movie, while this one is based around a book by a very acclaimed author, Cormac McCarthy. Sheesh, like, the Coen Brothers did an amazing job with adapting that book into a movie. There's very few differences between the book and the movie, but all around, it's like, this is like one of the best adaptations of a book period. And like the Coen Brothers, they're just great at what they do usually.
Yep.
You can honestly see any other Coen Brothers movie, but if I had to recommend one that is on the more serious side, No Country for Old Men's probably up there pretty easily. However, there's other ones I could think of. There's probably other ones I'm not sure I could fully remember.
So if I had to recommend a Coen Brothers film,
which one would you recommend?
I'd probably recommend Fargo.
Makes sense. Let's say I know some people. If you are from the South, at least, you would probably love Oh Brother Where Art Thou.
Oh, Brother Where Art Thou. Oh Brother Where Art Thou is like the obvious pick though for me.
It's very
Oh Brother Where Art Thou
obvious.
is just a fun movie.
It's all around a fun movie, but like it's
not very
funny.
serious in my opinion. So.
Oh no, it's not serious at all. Like literally, I mean, heck, that movie revitalized a very old bluegrass song.
Yeah.
And it's very impressive on, like, that's just a testament on how well the Coen Brothers can just revitalize something very old and make it new again. So, good on them. Alright, so I'm going to skip Bryce's number one because I messed up on going back and forth. So, we're going to go on to what I considered my number one at the time, Birdman.
Yep.
Alright, so this movie is very fascinating. It is a movie that is edited to be considered into, like, one entire shot.
Yes.
In which it does a very good job at doing.
And this movie is about basically a former like actor who is only known for one role, and they're basically been tightly typecasted for ages now, and everyone's like, oh, they're just this one person. They're not going to do anything from there. Mm-hmm. And them trying to basically break that mold and going to like being a stage right and being able to produce that kind of stuff. But everyone's like, no, you're from like some cheesy superhero film.
Yep. In which he's like, yeah, he's just wanting to create a new legacy for himself. In which we all have that type of mentality. We don't want to be like that one trick pony that you're only remembered for like something like say for example, like say the internet for example. You only had that one breakout video that trended for a day or two, and that's all everybody remembers you from the internet is like say, oh, you're that weird guy that jumped off a bridge and the thing snapped and you fell into the water face first. That's just a random one I'm thinking of, but it's pretty much just this entire movie is like just dealing with a man trying to create a new legacy, and it's pretty fascinating on how it does it. For me, though, it's like the strongest aspect is the technical work of this movie. Very well shot.
It is very technical.
Very, very technical. Very well shot. Very well acted as well. Sound is really well done as well. That's really all I had to really say about it. I wouldn't consider my number one nowadays, but I still think this movie is it's more artsy heavy than I would say, more so than anything, which I wouldn't probably put it in my number one still.
Also, very quick side note, main character, Michael Keaton, most famously played Batman.
Yeah.
And he's playing a character who's most famous for playing Birdman, so...
Yeah, funnily enough, yeah. There's some very fun overlap into that. But
yeah.
I don't really have much else to say about it. So, go check out Birdman. It's a fascinating piece. Alright, so finally, our final movie that we have pretty much been working towards for 4 years.
Yes.
Finally here. Shawshank Redemption. So, where do we start?
So, this is based off of a novella written by Stephen King.
Yeah. Third Stephen King related... Well, fourth related Stephen King thing now.
So, it was The Shining, it was The Green Mile, and was that... I think it's only 2, so it is the third.
Third, my bad.
But yeah, so this is based off a novella by him, in which case the actual director took a lot of liberties from it.
Yeah, he...
and for the better, in my opinion. The novella, I've read the novella, it's not that good.
Very short story, you can get done with it very fast. In which the director, or at least like the director and screenplay writers, they took the story and they thought, there's some potential here. So they expanded upon it, and yeah.
So, a little bit of a quick intro about this. I'm trying to remember the director's name, but they wound up writing out the whole thing and making a whole film. And a director came to them and was like, hey, for, I can't remember how many, but it was like $1 million or whatever. We want to take that script and make it ourselves. And he sat down and was like, do I want to turn down that much money? No, because I think I can make a great film from this.
Yes.
And they did.
Yeah. All around they did. So, there's only 2 scenes that I can really think of that really stand out in my mind. And one is in the midpoint of the movie, which I think we should say that more, because that has a more of an emotional piece into it.
Yes.
Let's talk about this other little tidbit, which is, it's kind of, you would probably think that at face value, it really doesn't mean much, but to me, it kind of does mean a lot, because it shows that the little bit of detail that they took into it really expanded upon it, and that is the arresting scene. So in the very end of the movie, where the whole big reveal is going on and and the whole controversy surrounding the entire prison is being exposed, people are being arrested. One officer is being arrested for murdering a former inmate.
Yes.
And the officer is reading off his Miranda rights, and it's written on a piece of paper. If you know when this movie would take place at the time, it would be in the late 60s. And this was right after the Supreme Court case, Miranda versus Arizona. And literally, not all officers knew the Miranda rights during that time, so it wouldn't surprise me that they would have to have a piece of paper where they had to read off all of it. And I thought, that is the best little detail I've ever seen in a movie, because if a bad screenplay writer or a weak one would not be able to recognize that, hey, it's around this time period, so they would have to read off from a piece of paper, because they wouldn't have memorized it from then by that point. So literally just reading off from it is like, that just works. Like, wow, that's a good attention to detail. So all around, great job. Now let's talk about the emotional piece.
Yes. Well, before we get to there, I do want to talk about one last thing.
Go ahead.
In which case, I also really appreciate them, the writing for both the character of Red and Andy.
Yes.
Because they do write the friendship very nicely. It's very believable, but more particularly, I like how they were capable of portraying the character of Andy, because the character has to be able to fulfill two things to make the story work, and the actor has to be able to make both of those work, and they're a very hard thing. Because they're supposed to come off as cold, but they're also supposed to be a very nice and enjoyable person. And they're able to portray this character by being actually very enjoyable and likable, but coming off initially as cold. Because they're just a very methodical kind of guy. They're very calculating. So they do a good job not only being able to write that, but the main actor, I wish I remembered his name. I don't know why, but I always just think of Hudsucker Proxy anytime I see him.
Oh, yeah.
Another Coen Brothers film. Not a good one. I shouldn't say not a good one. It's not bad. It's like average. But he winds up doing such a good job being able to tote this line of someone that feels very cold and menacing and just chilling to look at. Like, this person is a killer. You absolutely believe Andy is a killer throughout this movie. But as the movie goes on, you begin to actually feel like, oh yeah, this is like a normal dude. It's just, he has a trouble like being able to make good first impressions.
Mm-hmm.
So I really like the interpretation of that. And that really shows with the emotional state of the character of Brooks.
Alright, so this is the emotional piece I was talking about. So Brooks is a character that we meet from the beginning, and then he's eventually released from prison. He was a former inmate and everything. He's been throughout his entire life, or at least most of his adult life, in prison. And
50 years.
50 years. And he's an older man by the time he's released. And, well, this is where the emotional piece begins. If you don't know anything about the justice system in the United States, one thing you should know is that there is a weird phenomenon that happens with a lot of inmates that have been in prison for a long time, and they have to try to adjust themselves to the modern day life that they are not accustomed to.
Yes.
Brooks does not know anything that was different from when he comes out, and he doesn't know what to do. It's like literally a culture shock.
So yeah, one of the best lines I feel for this is, at this time it would have been the 1960s or 50s when it was released. I believe 50s actually.
I believe it would be the 50s in which he was released.
In which case he would have been released in the 50s, and one of his opening lines is, I saw a car once when I was a kid, and now they're everywhere.
Yeah.
It does such a good job of just showing how much time has changed in 50 years.
Mm-hmm. Essentially, yeah, it's like, it really goes to show and all like that. And at the very end, I guess this is a major spoiler right here, but eventually Brooks cannot handle this anymore. Like, he is too accustomed to prison that he hung himself.
Yeah.
And
he writes a letter back saying, I don't want to be afraid anymore, and so I'm going to do the only thing I can think of.
Yep. And that is a very realistic thing that happens to a lot of people when they leave prison or jail or anything for that matter. And it's just like one of those things that is not really talked about within the justice system in the United States. Like, this was like set in the 60s, like 50s at this point, or 60s, and that is still a reality that is happening to this very day.
Yeah.
So it's like something that we should all become accustomed to and try to address at some point. But yeah, that's like, it's a very heavy piece to think about.
Yeah.
So all around, yeah, like Shawshank Redemption, it takes a very short story and it expands on it quite heavily. Very realistic characters, great performances, all around. It's just a very sublime movie.
Yep.
Definitely check it out. But anything else you have to say, Bryce?
No, I feel like that was well discussed about it. So.
Yeah. So that concludes the spoiler episode. Yeah.
If you have any suggestions for movies for us to see in the future, we always like to hear those.
Yeah.
Because we still have a few episodes planned out. Matter of fact, keep an eye out for next episode.
Yes.
In which case, we are going to be filming the awards. So,
Yes.
if these spoilers was not enough for you, you're still hesitant about what movies to see, what your priority should be, I sat down and made some awards to give out. We sat down and we're going to be coming out with some categories to go over them. And based off what recommendations we have and what you prioritize in a film. So, for example, if you're someone that's like, I really love good special effects, or I really love good acting, or I really love good writing or dialogue, we'll be giving out prizes and awards being like, we feel these are the movies with that tailored to this category the best.
Mm-hmm.
So keep an eye out for that. We'll be doing that for the next episode. So
Yep. Check it out next week.
this will be going exclusively over the movies in our top 20. One day in the future, we may do this for all the movies that we know of, but we probably want to do that way down the line when after we talk about a lot more movies. So that way we could use all the movies we've discussed on the podcast.
Mm-hmm.
But for right now, it's just going to be for the top 40. So that way, because those are the movies that both me and him have seen together that we know for sure.
Yes.
So.
Yep, all around. So, yeah, everybody, thank you all so much for watching. Hopefully this has not been a very long piece to listen to. However, all around, yeah. So stay tuned for the next episode. It'll be a very fun listen to as well. It'll be very, very short too. Like, it ain't gonna take us very long to go through these categories. So, all around, yeah. So, anything else you have to say, Bryce?
Screw you.
Bye.